Welcome to Everyone Loves Guitar, where we get to sit down and talk with interesting professional guitar players and related music industry experts. If you love playing guitar, stick around. You're in the right place. Hey, this is Craig Garber. When I'm not interviewing world-class guitar players, I'm busy helping clients with their marketing. In fact, since March of 2000, I've helped over 300 clients in 108 different industries all over the world sell everything from $20 books to $5,000 seminar seats and everything in between. I even authored a marketing book called How to Make Maximum Money with Minimum Customers. And now I'm giving away a free marketing strategy session to business owners who qualify. On this call, we'll discuss what's currently working in your business, specific sales and marketing problems you're struggling with, and I'll identify specific strategies you can use to overcome these problems and increase your cash flow. To find out if you qualify and to book your free marketing strategy session with me, go to everyonelovesguitar.com/marketing right now. Again, to book your free marketing strategy session with me, go to everyonelovesguitar.com/marketing right now. Thanks for listening. Now let's get on with the show.
Yeah, man.
Hey, everybody. This is Craig Garber from Everyone Loves Guitar, and we have a triple threat. Our guest today has just like a beautiful voice. He's an incredible guitar player, and he's a brilliant songwriter, and he's been doing all of those things at a very high level for quite a while. We're really lucky to have Steve Wariner with us. Steve began playing music professionally at a really early age. As a youngster, he played drums in his dad's band, and he played bass in cover bands. He was discovered by the legendary Dottie West at just 17 years old while playing a set in an Indiana club. She hired him on the spot to be her bass player, and that was a gig that lasted 3 years. That opportunity led to Steve being commissioned by his idol Chet Atkins to play bass in Chet's band. And it was Chet that eventually signed Steve to his first recording contract at RCA in 1977 and produced Steve's first recording session at the historic RCA Studio B. Since then, Steve's released 14 number one hits. I'm just going to say that again, 14 number one hits, over 30 top 10 hits, 3 gold albums, 4 Grammy Awards, 3 CMA Awards, 1 ACM Awards, a Christian Country Music Association Award, TNN Music City News Award, and 15 BMI Millionaire Awards. Steve's a member of the Grand Ole Opry, the Kentucky Music Hall of Fame, the National Thumbpickers Hall of Fame, and the Music City Walk of Fame. He also recorded the theme song for the ABC hit TV series Who's the Boss, and several of his own songs have been recorded by other artists and become number one hits for people like Garth Brooks, which was Long Neck Bottle, and Clint Black, Nothing But the Taillights. A top 5 hit for Keith Urban, Where the Blacktop Ends, and a top 20 hit for Brian White. Now, this is what the really cool thing is for this guitar audience here. Steve's only one of 5 guitar players in the world to be given the Certified Guitar Player Award by Chet Atkins, joining John Knowles, Marcel Dadi, Jerry Reed, and Tommy Emmanuel. Nashville led Steve to collaborating and performing with a long list of talent, including Glen Campbell, Vince Gill, Brad Paisley, and Ricky Skaggs. 20 albums into his 5-decade career, Steve most recently released his latest project called All Over the Map. It's a 12-song album spanning all over the map, actually, country, bluegrass, rock, jazz, and pop. And like I said, he's a real triple threat, and he's a great songwriter. He's got a voice that sounds like he's still 35, and he probably looks maybe 40, and he's a top shelf. We're going to have a beauty special on Everyone Loves Guitar for Steve Wariner's tips and tricks, and he's a top shelf guitar player. Man, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Craig, thank you, man. Really a pleasure to be with you. My buddies have been telling me about you, man. I feel like I know you.
Well, good.
I got a lot of pals that go, "Do you know Craig?" So I feel like we're old friends.
Well, good. Well, hopefully we'll be by the end of this. I'm sure of it.
Sir.
Man, addressing the last thing I mentioned about you being a triple threat, would you consider yourself more a songwriter first or a guitar player first or both?
Man, I don't know. I think it's how I wake up in the morning. Different days I kind of feel different. I think when it's all said and done, I'm a musician first, and I think Vince. You mentioned Vince a minute ago. Vince and I have talked about this before. He always says this, and I know Merle Haggard was the same way. Merle would rather, and I feel this way. I'd rather hang out with all the players if I'm doing anything, I just want to go hang out with all the players and the musicians and be one of those guys and hang with them. And I know that's the way those guys feel or felt too. Merle was that way, I know. And I don't know. I think it's because I started there. That's where it began for me, Craig, as a player. I remember my dad when I was a little kid, I mean, real little, I think third grade, something like that. The reason I equate it to third grade is I know that's the year. For me, in the third grade, you always remember where you were when Kennedy was killed, John President Kennedy. Sure. I was in the third grade living in Fishers, Indiana. And I remember my dad at that time had a little country band, and they'd practice during the week a couple nights. He had a regular job, but I was fascinated when they would start coming in with the Fender Bassman amp. And he had a guy playing bass named Paul Franz that had real long hair. This was 63. There wasn't any, the Beatles, it was like, man, just getting ready to happen, the British explosion and all that. But I remember we had a drummer came in, set up his drums. I was like, my gosh, this is what I want to do, Wow. And my dad was a really good musician, and he played fiddle. He didn't play fiddle in this band, but he played electric. He just had bought a Jazzmaster, Fender Jazzmaster, which I learned to play on that guitar. So I was so impressed by that, and that I think if I look at myself as anything, I think foremost I'm a player, and then the songwriting came much later. Actually, the singing came much later. I was in a band. I started writing songs. I saw that my dad wrote songs, and I'd go, how does he do that? He's rhyming these words, and it's really interesting what he's saying, and it's musically, he's just a talented guy, and he played anything with strings on it. My dad could play. You could give him anything, he could play it. Fiddle, banjo, steel guitar, whatever. But I remember he started writing these songs, and at about 15, 16, I started trying to rhyme words and tried to write a little bit. But I was in bands around that same time. I was in a couple bands that, quite honestly, they needed singers. They didn't have enough. I was with the one band. They go, you're going to have to learn a few songs. Can you sing anything? I go, no, I don't really sing. And so I was 14, maybe 15 years old, playing with some older guys always, VFW halls, those sort of things. So I learned me 3 or 4 songs, man. And I go, well, here's my fastballs. I got me a couple songs I can help us get through these 4 sets or whatever. And so I learned some songs, and then I started getting attention from the audience. People seemed to like it, and I became the focus of, as the more I learned, the more I became more the focus of the band, with my singing. I go, well, I guess I'm a singer, Yeah. I just kind of fell into the singing. I was really a player. And you mentioned the bass. If you notice with Dottie West, Bob Luman, Chet Atkins, I always played bass.
Yeah, I was going to talk about that for sure.
I started playing bass. The first instrument I ever played was a little Dan Electro bass. My dad had a little copper Dano, and that was my first short scale little neck. My dad would practice with his bands, and I would grab this little bass in the next room and kind of play along with them. I knew all their songs as well as they did, and soon my dad realized that, and then I kind of worked my way into the band. As a little kid, I would play bass, and then later I kind of played drums with my dad's band too. He needed a drummer, and I said, yeah, Dad, I can do that. Never played in my life, and I go, I can do it. I know these songs. And my dad went up to I remember standing in front of the drum kits, and there was a beautiful red Rogers kit and a green Trixon kit, a cheap German. And I go, well, which ones do you like, son? And I go, these red ones are cool. My dad looked at the price and goes, ooh, let's look at the green ones. So he bought me this little green set of cheapo Trixons. And I still have them to this day. And,
you still have that guitar? The Jazzmaster. You have the Jazzmaster.
I still have it.
Wow, that's a treasure, man.
It's my dad's. I remember when he bought it brand new. He bought it at Arthur's Music Store in Indianapolis. And
very cool.
Arthur's is still there, yeah.
That's a miracle.
But anyway, I really, the singing stuff was always like, I was in a couple bands where they just needed somebody to sing and fill up the time. And I was like, yeah, I know I can sing you I know this old Charlie Pride song or whatever. My dad knew every song known to man, so I learned a lot of songs. My training was pretty good with my dad because by this time I was in other bands and they needed singers, and I go, yeah, I know some songs. I was really, and the bands I was in, like with Dottie West, when she offered me a job, she needed a bass player. They already had a really good guitar player named Jimmy Johnson in that band. So I go, yeah, I wanted to get to Nashville. I was 17.
Yeah.
So I go, yeah, I play bass. Yeah, I can do that. I'll take it. And so I came to Nashville, and, you know, I had a half a credit of government that I needed from my high school for the next. So my school let me graduate early. My grades were okay. But I had this one half a credit. I go, man, I had to take a little correspondence thing and try to do school on the road. And back then they let you do that. My school they let me do it. I took off on the road with Dottie West. First gig was Reno, Nevada for 2 weeks.
17.
A bus ride to Reno. And we got to Oklahoma City, and I told the band we pulled into a truck stop. I'd never even been out of Indiana and Kentucky.
So these guys were like you're sort of like looking after you like big brothers and big sisters.
Definitely.
It's cool.
They all did, and especially Jimmy Johnson, the guitar player. He became super close. I kind of stayed with him a lot. He was kind of my roommate, and he looked after me like a big brother. And I couldn't read a chart. He taught me how to read a chart on that trip. We got to Reno. We got to Oklahoma City into a gas station, or fuel it up with the bus. And I go, "Are we here?" And they go, "No, we're halfway there." And I go, "Oh, geez, you know." That was my first taste of riding a bus right there to Reno from Nashville. But you know, I always looked at myself as a player first, and I started because the writing and the singing was always came much later. I've been playing since I was 9 years old, 9 or 10. I first started playing, you know, influenced by my dad and his bands, you know.
But one thing that's cool is, you know, you've mentioned several times about, you know, your dad's enthusiasm, and you can see that your enthusiasm, you know, you've been doing this 50 years, man, and you got the same level of enthusiasm. So that's really cool. And I would imagine that your son is the same exact way.
Yeah.
That's cool,
My
man.
son, man, I brag on him for 2 seconds here.
Go ahead.
Both sons are just so musical and very different ends of the spectrum. But Ryan, my oldest son, is so, you know, I brag on him, and I sound like a father here, but
that's okay.
You can ask any of the mutual friends that we have that know him. Ryan, he knows more about tone and gear and pedals and how to get that sound that you're looking for. I mean, I call him when I'm making a record. I'll say, "Ryan, get your ass over here.
That's cool.
You're going to help me with this tone. I got to do this solo on this thing. What do you think? Should I use this?" You know, and he'll dive in. He's a tone doctor, man, you know.
That's awesome.
But both kids are real, you know, I was telling you off the air that Ross, my youngest, is in New York City and composing and working for a company up there that does gaming app stuff for big game stuff. I mean, he's really doing great in that world. So it makes you proud to watch your sons, especially when they're doing what they really love to do and what they want to do, and they're successful at it, you know. So makes you proud, you know. And when they're real little, I was just vowing and saying, I'm not going to, you know, if they're dentists or if they're auto mechanics, whatever, just so they're happy. I don't, whatever. And then they start picking up instruments. It's like, you know, it's natural. They're going to do it. I did it with my dad, you know. But think about my dad as Craig, as my dad was, check this out. My dad was from very, very poor rural Kentucky. My mom and dad both, same little area. And my dad was one of 12 kids.
Holy smokes.
One of 12 kids. My dad's dad was a farmer, you know, just poor, dirt poor. And my dad, he left home the same age I did, 17. But his reason was to go to the Navy and be on the other side of the world in the South Pacific. But I think that was his escape. But he played music. He was already playing music and played music over there, you know, and in the Navy somewhat. That's not all he did. But my point too is my dad had all these brothers, and they were all and sisters too. Some of them. That whole family was so musical.
Wow.
All my dad's uncles. I got an Uncle Lowell that just passed recently. and he was bluegrass. I mean, he didn't want to hear anything about anything but bluegrass. If he would talk to you if it was a bluegrass conversation, you know? And he had his favorites. He was hardcore. And then my Uncle Jimmy, my dad's younger brother, who's gone now too. Everybody's gone now, that family, my dad's siblings, but my dad's youngest brother, Jimmy, who was, you know, the closest to me in age, he was a huge influence on me as well, because he was Mr. Fender. You know, he had a Fender, the first Fender Showman amp I saw. He bought a Fender Showman amp in Chicago in the early 60s. I have it.
Wow. So you got all this old, awesome, like Fender gear.
It's a memorial to him almost, because
That's amazing.
I remember I played drums in a band with him when I was in the 6th grade. We played on a television show. I played drums in this little band, and they did, check this out, they did all twangy Fender stuff. They did Merle Haggard, Buck Owens. They did all the Bakersfield. They would do Waylon Jennings, early Waylon stuff, and Waylon was just coming into thing, but all the Buck Owens stuff, Merle Haggard, Win Stewart, all the West Coast. He was twangy Fender country. He had Telecasters, and that was my thing. I was like, man, how? And they wore those nudie kind of jackets, and it was like, of course, I had to wear a white short sleeve shirt like I was going to church. You know, no nudie suits for me. You know, so. But what an influence for me to be around him. And he wasn't that much older than I was. I mean, he was older, but he was the closest to me of all my dad's brothers. And he drove a 66 red Chevelle Super Sport.
Wow, that's a badass car.
Yeah, I was like, damn. And he had the hair, Elvis kind of hair. I wanted to be my Uncle Jimmy, you know. He came in with the cool Telecasters and the Fender amps. He'd lay the legs back on that Showman and lean it back, and I was like, damn, man, that is so cool. And I played drums with him on radio shows, and in Bowling Green for a while one summer. We lived in Louisville at the time, and he did too. He lived down the street from us, and we would ride down to Bowling Green on the weekends this one summer of '68, I think it was. And we did a live television show in Bowling Green, and it was a variety show, but there was a lot of country artists on this show, just local people. You know, local Kentucky acts. And you know who was on that show? I didn't realize it till later, but Ricky Skaggs was on that show the same time I was, and so was Keith Whitley.
Wow.
And we were all kids.
That's wild.
Ricky and I laugh about that because he goes, oh, my God. I remember Ricky was doing his bluegrass. Keith was doing his bluegrass, and I was doing my twangy drumming behind my uncle's band, you know.
That's so cool, man.
Bakersfield stuff, Merle Haggard, Buck Owens, and then I later become friends with Buck Owens and Merle Haggard, and I mean, it's just crazy how this world works. I mean, how things work out. But I told both of those guys about that too, and so it's a crazy world.
Wow, cool story, man.
Yeah, my Uncle Jimmy was the coolest. Everybody wanted to be like him. He was just real quiet and introverted, didn't say a lot, but really good guitar player too. He brought in a Fender Wildwood, if you remember those guitars.
No, what is that?
It's one of the it's the first time anybody did this, but Fender tried this. It's a semi-hollow body, kind of 335-ish guitar. It really didn't catch on, but they injected the wood with dyes, and it was a real wild-looking wood pattern in this guitar.
Look that up because that sounds cool looking.
It's called a Fender Wildwood, one word. And I never had seen one before, and they didn't really go over, but it's the first time I'd ever seen one. But he always kept his Telecasters pretty close by, you know. But Jimmy was a huge influence on me as well as my dad and his other brothers. My dad had another couple brothers one was a naval officer, 30-year naval officer, and he played the crap out of harmonica. I mean, he wasn't even a musician; he just did it for fun. But he would pick up those chromatic harps that you had a button on the end, like the harmonic cats. He could play jazz and all this stuff, you know, with a big harp that's about that long, not a regular harp, about a foot long. And he would play the crap out of that thing. I was a little kid going, damn, he's in his Navy suit playing the shit out of it, you know. So my dad played harmonica really well too.
So you just grew up amongst all this. So it was a very natural, progression. It was almost like the family business kind of, even though,
You know what, Craig, this is no joke on this. I remember the point where I went to a kid's house, Dennis Irely, I think was his name, from my school. And I remember going to his house, and it's the first time it dawned on me. I go, oh, where's all the guitars and amps? And I go,
yeah, because that was normal.
I thought it was normal that everybody had guitars. Everybody was playing, and you had capos and stuff, fiddles laying around. And I remember at that point where I go, oh, everybody don't do that like we do. Oh, okay.
So that must have been a big like realization for you all of a sudden. Like,
I go, oh, we're a musical family, and everybody don't do that. Okay.
Yeah.
I get my dad. I never knew my grandmother on my dad's side, but he said that she played finger style guitar, like rolling. He said she was really a good guitar player, but she didn't play like this. She played like this, like rolling with her fingers, finger style.
Yeah.
And she was a real tiny lady. I met her, but I don't really remember it. But
sure.
She was. He said, yeah, she sang great, sang in church. All my aunts sang in church, and really good singers, all of them. And he said your grandmother sang great too, and she played real good guitar. But I'd love to see my grandmother play guitar. I'd love to have seen that.
Yeah, of course, man. What a warm story. That's really nice, man.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah.
Hey, you work with Chet for a long time. I was curious, like, I'm sure you learned a ton from working with him. I was curious if he had some of the best advice that he might have given you.
You know what? Chet was the guy for me that everybody has a guy or two like this. He was the guy for me that I not only called him about music stuff, but I could call him anytime. And I did a lot. I'd say, Chet, what should I do, man? The label is doing this, and they're talking about, my producer is, this was way down the road even. And Chet would say, well, I'll tell you what I would do. I mean, that's so great. And I would call him even with advice about girls or,
that's great.
Relationships. I'd call him. He'd say, man, you should, this was way before I was married, but I would call him about anything. He was like my best pal, really, almost like a second father figure, really. That's the stuff a lot of the stuff you would talk to your dad about, but I would call, I did call my dad too, but a lot of times, a lot of the music stuff, particularly because Chet knew there wasn't anything I could throw at him that he'd go, oh yeah, I'd done that. I did that in the 50s, but whatever.
Yeah.
But he knew everything. And so I leaned on him a lot. He, not only about music, but about everything. He was great and listened and took the time and was just a great friend, And he did, quite honestly, he did that with me too, because of a few times he would call me he was going through some rough patches health-wise a couple of times. I really felt like I was with him a couple of times when he got some bad news and stuff like that. And I think I was some small ways, I think I was a lean-to for him in some ways, particularly. Once I remember I was in his office, he got a call from a doctor saying that it was not good news and he had to have an operation. And I won't get into all that, but so I think that went both ways. Certainly more me on him, but occasionally I guess that's what friends do though, right? So.
Totally. He must have been that kind of a guy, always looked to help, younger upcoming guys. I know I interviewed Pat Ferguson and those guys they had a similar relationship where, Pat said Chet changed his life, and he brought him down.
Yeah, he did mine too, I have to say. I remember once I had a deal with my label. I was kind of in a thing with my label. It wasn't good. And they were, I think they were kind of at the point where it was time for me to go to another label, and I could tell, and they were indifferent. And so I called Chet and I said, what should I do, Chet? I was almost in tears, like, what should I do? And he just he goes, you know what? He goes, you're Steve Wariner. You've already had all these. He goes, if your career ended now, he goes, you've already had, he just talked me through it. You've had all these number ones. He goes, you're always going to be Steve Wariner. You play great. You blah, blah, blah. You this, you that. He goes, what are you worried about? He goes, just go be you and do what you do. And he kind of talked me down in a lot of ways. And I was like, wow, that makes a lot of, but he's done everything. There's nothing you could do that he didn't know about,
That's great. It's good that you have
I was lucky though, man. I was lucky that early on, he was as a producer, I'd ride around with him and he would I didn't appreciate it at the time so much, but he would say, "See that house right there? That's where so-and-so lived there. We used to come over there." It's like, man, I'm getting the behind the curtains tour here. He knew everything about everything in Nashville. Yeah, Johnny Cash, one time he and I were, whatever, it's like, man, yeah. But my point is, how lucky am I as a kid to be doing all that? And, he said, "Come over to my house. I want you to sing on my Christmas record." What? Yeah, I'm doing a new Christmas record. I want you to sing it. Okay.
But you know what,
this
though?
Is crazy,
I bet that also helped you accept your success much easier. You know what I'm saying? Because sometimes that was sort of like a norm for you in the circle you were. And sometimes when you go from, 0 to 100 career wise, it could be overwhelming, or it could be, you could feel undeserving of it. And that probably made it a little easier for you, having sort of grown up around that.
I totally agree. And I think you're 100% right. I remember walking, he'd say, "Hey, come over, Steve, come over to my office, meet me at whatever." And I'd go walk in. I mean, this happened over and over and over. You don't know who would be in his office. I walk in once and Shel Silverstein is sitting there, and he goes, "Steve, Shel Silverstein." Wow. Or you walk in, it could be, but yeah, I was around all these. Lenny Bro, once I walk in, Lenny Bro's in there. I got tons of recordings of Lenny and Chet and me, and just all these incredible players and artists, Roger Miller, and it's just crazy. Yeah. So I think you're right. That really helped me for down the road, because I was just a dumb kid. I was like, "Oh, this is just the way it is." And then later down the road, you go, "Wow, that was special. All these people are pretty much gone now." And wow, how lucky was I, but Chet was always, thing about it always impressed me with Chet. I think anybody that knew him would say this. I remember walking into his office one day and he said, "Come here, Steve, come here." He goes, "I got to show you this guitar lick." He goes, "I just learned this lick." And he was already becoming an old man at that point. And I go, how awesome is that? Here he is. He's still excited
about a new lick.
And about a lick. And he's all that he's done, and he's thrilled. He goes, "I stumbled onto this thing, and you're going to love this. Check this out." He was so excited about it. And you're Chet Atkins, and you've done it all, well,
that's the special thing. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. My first session with Chet was the day after Elvis died. It was the very next morning after Elvis passed away. And I remember it was Studio A, the big studio at RCA. And I remember pulling into the studio, and at that time, the big three, ABC, NBC, CBS, trucks were there with satellite dishes. And David Briggs was on the session, who played with Elvis. And, of course, Chet produced Elvis at RCA and all that. So I walked into my session. Reggie Young was there, and Larry London, all these great players. And it was like they were interviewing Chet, about Elvis. There 3 networks were there, had him cornered, and he was doing a press conference, basically. But I remember our session didn't get started for a long time, because of that, and at RCA. And I stood and watched Chet field these questions. Chet had a suit and tie on. My first sessions, he came into the session with a suit and tie on, like you see pictures of the Beatles. Everybody had suit coats and ties. And
was that normal back then in Nashville?
At that point.
Okay.
Yeah, it was just at the edge of being not normal. But Chet was. But it's funny. He would come into all dressed up for a session. He was producing, and then he would walk out in the big room, and all the players would gather around him. It's so different than it is now, but I'm so glad that I caught a little piece of that era, and all the players would gather around, and Chet would say, "We're going to do, here's some charts. Here, we're going to do this song, and here's what I want from this young kid. I want this record to be blah, blah." And everybody was like paying attention and listening to every word. And it was, fantastic, and then it quickly changed to a different world, where the recording was, well, really there were no home studios back then. Chet had one, Les Paul had one, and
right.
A few people had home studios in those early days, but it wasn't prevalent. A lot of people, that wasn't even the case yet at that time.
Wow. Hey, you've worked with so many people. I'm going to throw a few names out there, and
Sure.
if you could talk for each of them, how you wound up meeting them, and maybe if you could share a story or experience about working together,
sure.
that'd be great. Glen Campbell.
Oh man, what a talent! One of my favorite people. Carl Jackson introduced me to Glen Campbell. Carl's a great producer, a Grammy award-winning producer, and one of probably the top 5-string banjo players in the world too. But he played with Glen for years, and he introduced me to Glen the first time. I got a good Glen story. The first time I met him briefly, but the second time I met him, I was playing in Cleveland, Ohio, across town at a festival, radio station festival, and Glen was playing the Front Row Theater. And Carl said, come over. Or maybe I told Carl, we want to come over and see Glen. And so he left me tickets. I'm sitting in the auditorium, like this big auditorium, and Glen is on stage with an orchestra playing his show. And he introduces me. He said, I hear Steve Warner's in the audience. He's got a record on radio right now, folks, and blah, blah, blah. And he gets me up out of the audience.
How cool is that?
I'm sitting in a big auditorium.
Oh, man.
Spotlight's on me, and I come up, and next thing I know, I'm on stage with Glen Campbell. I'd only met him just like briefly for one.
Were you nervous?
Oh, my God. Yeah. And I'm singing hard. He goes,
That's so cool.
He looked at me, and he goes, Steve, let's do Rhinestone Cowboy. And he counts it off. And I'm singing harmony on Rhinestone Cowboy with Glen Campbell.
Oh, man. How cool. That's such a cool thing to do.
Unbelievable. He gets me out of the audience of all things. And then he gives me his guitar and he goes, do something. And I did a song called I've Already Taken, which later became a hit for me. And Glen's singing harmony. Never heard the song in his life, and he's singing harmony with me on it.
But how cool is that? Like, you're like an up and coming guy, and he's like, hey, I hear Steve Warner's here. He's got a new album. I'll come up.
He goes, are you out there, Steve? Or where are you? Where are you? The spotlight finds me, and he goes, come on up.
How cool is that? What a sweetheart,
that
man.
was Glen. We played many times together through the years, and we recorded together. I had a hit with him called The Hand That Rocks the Cradle. We had a big hit. We were both on Capitol. Eventually I wound up at Capitol, but anyway, one of my dear friends. And when he was struggling at the end there, with his battles, I went out and visited him too a couple times, and just sat with him and talked a little bit. And gosh, I'm honored that they asked me to sing at his service too. I sang "Gentle on My Mind."
Oh, beautiful!
And,
wow, what a cool, great story, man. That's so cool.
Yeah, thanks, man. He was the best.
You mentioned him earlier, Ricky Skaggs.
Yeah, Skaggs and I go way back. I don't remember the first time I met him, but I remember some of my greatest memories. We go so far back, I don't even remember when I first met him. But I think I met him on a flight one time. The very first time, I think he was playing with Emmy Lou, and we were flying to L.A. flying to California together, and we briefly spoke. But then when I started having hits, we were doing shows together. I'd opened some shows for him, and he'd always ask me to come out and play with him in his show, and we would jam and play. And then Mark O'Connor asked he and Vince and myself to play on the song called Restless, which turned out to be my first Grammy that I ever won, and at Radio City Music Hall in New York. And Vince and Ricky and I, we were all up there with Mark. But Ricky and I we're from really close by in Kentucky. My family's from not far from where his family. He's from just a little bit northeast of where my family's from. So we always talk Kentucky stuff,
Right.
A lot of, because we're from that, we are both from that area. But I don't know. Ricky's another guy that I can pick up the phone and say, hey, man, what do you think? I'm thinking about getting this amp or this. We talk guitars and amps a lot. You wouldn't think that, but he's a big, everybody thinks of him as mandolin and bluegrass, but he'll talk Fender amps with you, and he's got a great collection of old gear and stuff. He's really into the vintage, the vintage Fender amps and stuff. We always kind of get on those, but he's one of those guys I'll call. He's a dear friend. I'll call him and chat with him every once in a while, catch him on the road, or he's going to be going in the Country Music Hall of Fame, and I called him the other day and we chatted about it, and I went down actually to the ceremony where they announced the people going in at the CMA. But I'll pick up the phone and we'll just chat and catch up. He's like an old friend, we'll catch up every now and then. So great guy.
That's cool,
Brilliant
man.
player, that's for sure.
Let me ask this. This may be hard to answer or impossible to answer, but you've been involved in so many like really cool projects with so many different people over the years. Is it possible to pick like the top 3 experiences that you had musically, either because of the work itself or, your work or the richness of the experience or the personalities involved?
Boy, that'd be tough. I mean, so many. I mean, a couple came to mind when you asked that. I don't know how I'd have to sit and think about it a little bit, but certainly, I think some of the experiences you mentioned, Glen Campbell. I remember recording with him, and I thought his parts would be on tape, and then I would do mine later. But I come in the studio at Emerald, and Glen's there, and we're face to face. I remember Glen had like a lifesaver in his mouth. He would take it out and sing and then pop it back in. I thought that was so cool.
That's very cool, man.
And I think he sang part of that record with it in his mouth, to be honest with you. But
that's great.
Recording with Glen Campbell was phenomenal. We were face to face. We were like, when I say face to face, we were like touching each other almost. So it wasn't, with technology, you'd think, well, maybe he'll do his part in California or whatever. But recording with Glen, certainly the stuff, I mean, I got to say, working with Chet, I recorded with Chet a lot through the years. He asked me to play I played bass, actually. I played bass on the record he did with Mark Knopfler.
Oh, did you? I got that record.
Yeah, I played on 4 tracks.
That's
so
cool.
That was a great experience. And Chet asked me to play on a lot of neat stuff. And I had him play on a lot of my records. But gosh, I don't know, Craig. That's 2 that come to mind. And this is crazy, but I played on a Megadeth record, the last record that they did with Dave Mustaine.
You're serious?
Believe that or not, that's crazy.
How did that come about?
I played steel guitar on it.
Oh, how did that
Dave came to one of my shows. I played City Winery, and he came to my show, and we got to talking after the show, and we just kind of became friends. We went to lunch not too long after that and became pals. And one day he calls me and he goes, "Man, I need a steel player on this record." And I go, "You're kidding me?" And a steel? And he goes, "Yeah, just to play this line and da da da." And I go, "Well, I know some really good ones." He goes, "Well, I hear you play steel." And I go, "Not like these guys do." And he goes, "Well, I want you to play on it." And I go, "Okay." So I took my double neck Emmons downtown and played on it. That was a cool experience.
That's wild.
He's a cool guy, man. I really think a lot of Dave.
That's really cool. That was interesting. I was surprised to hear that.
Yeah, that's a lot of people go, "What? You did what?"
Yeah, but that's pretty cool now between all the stuff you've done and heavy metal.
Yeah, I mean that's like crazy, gosh, through the years, you think back to stuff I played on, so many interesting things. I can't. Those are the few that come to my mind, but gosh, there's certainly a lot of really cool stuff I've played on and got to do through the years. And I played on, I tell you, one of the coolest things. Yeah, this has to be the biggest day of my life, probably recording wise. When I worked for a guy named Bob Luman, he was a tremendous artist. He was a rockabilly star first, and then later in his career, he became a country. He had a lot of big country hits. "Lonely Women Make Good Lovers," and Neither One of Us Wants to Be.
That's a great title, man. Lonely Women Make Good Lovers.
It was a big hit too. I had a hit with it, and he did. I did it as a tribute. Not so PC anymore, maybe. But,
yeah. Lonely. Hey, what is PC anymore? Pretty much anything that comes out of your mouth, someone's going to piss and moan about. You're hurting somebody's feelings. So
somebody's going to get their feelings hurt.
Yeah.
But so when I toured with him and played bass after Dottie West, and I tell you, here's a cool story on Bob Luman. He had 2 guys in his band from Shreveport, Louisiana, he had a guy named James Burton in his band, and he had a guy named Joe Osborne in his band together.
Wow, that's some firepower there, man.
Back in the day, yeah. And then Ricky Nelson stole him away, Burton, and then of course Elvis. But anyway, he always had really good bands, rocking bands. He was a rockabilly guy, really from East Texas. But one day, Bob had been very ill and had an operation, made a comeback, and was on the Opry. He made a big Opry comeback where he lived in Hendersonville. Excuse me, where he lived in Hendersonville. Right across the street where he lived was Roy Orbison, and then right next to him was Johnny Cash.
Holy
so the
smokes.
three of them were neighbors. And so one day, Bob was making his comeback, feeling better and starting to get his strength back. And Bob said, "I'm going to make a new album." And he said, this was 1976. And he said, "Johnny Cash is going to produce it." And I was playing in his band, and I was just starting to write songs. And I'd play some of these songs on the road, and they would hear them, and Bob heard them. And Bob said, I want to cut some of your songs.
Wow.
I'm thinking Johnny Cash, And so we go into the studio. He wanted me to play bass on it. And Mike, some of the guys in the band played on the record. He used his band. Then he augmented it with some other folks. Larry London played drums. A guy named Paul Yandell, who was Chet Atkins' right-hand guy for 30 plus years, grade A session player. Paul Yandell was on the session too. And I knew him a little bit. But so I come into the session, and Bob says he had picked out 4 songs that he really liked of mine. And so I go, well, man, if I can get one of these songs on this record, I never had a cut yet.
Okay.
And so I go into the control room. Johnny Cash is in there. 1976 Johnny Cash.
Wow.
And Bob Lumen says, "Do that song. I got to have room to change my mind for John." So I get down on my knee playing Johnny Cash's guitar, and I play "Got to Have Room to Change My Mind." And it's just the engineer, Bob Lumen, and Johnny Cash, and me on my knee. And Johnny Cash in his voice goes, "I love it. Let's do it." And I'm like,
"Oh my God."
And then Bob Lumen goes, "Do that other song, Steve," or whatever. And I go, "Okay." And I do that, and I go, I'm waiting to hear. And Cash goes, "Yeah, I love it. Let's do that one too." And I did that 4 times, and he did every time. Cash goes, "Let's do it. I like it."
That had to make you feel like $1 million bucks.
I had cold chills. I go, "Oh my God! I'm hanging out with Johnny Cash. He's producing this record, but I'm playing on it." And and now I was a nervous wreck, of course. And then we go out on the morning session. We cut the songs, and Paul Yandell's playing guitar. And now the 2 o'clock, we go to lunch. 2 o'clock session comes around. We're going to add an acoustic guitar to the mix now, guys. We're going to bring in an acoustic guitar player for the 2 o'clock session. It was Waylon Jennings. Waylon came in and played acoustic guitar. I'm playing bass.
Oh,
and so Waylon's now the acoustic guitar player. Now we're cutting my songs. And after the day's over with, and Paul Yandell comes over to me and says, "Those are your songs we cut, those 4?" And I go, "Yeah." And Paul goes, "Wow, those are cool." He goes, "Why don't you get me a reel together?" He said, "I'll take them to Chet." He said, "I think Chet would like to hear your writing and singing and playing." I go, "You're kidding me." So I went immediately and put together a little cassette tape for Paul. And he called Chet, and Chet called me, and that's how I got with Chet from that day.
Oh my God. That was like the lottery day of your life.
That was the lottery day for me. And
I got goosebumps, man. That's crazy.
And this is true story. I was in Kentucky. Chet Atkins called me, and my brother used to screw with me all the time. He'd call me and he'd change his voice and go, "Hey, this is Merle Haggard. Steve Wariner there." And he did that to me all the time. And so Chet Atkins calls me and he goes, "Yeah, Steve, this is Chet Atkins." And I go, "Shut the hell up, Kenny." And he goes, "No." Chet goes, "No, it really is Chet Atkins." And I go, "It is Chet." And he goes, I want to meet with you." And he said, "Paul gave me your tape." And I thought it was my brother Kenny screwing with me, Wow.
What a freaking story.
So I put together, So I go down and meet with Chet, and that's where it led to us recording together. And I walk in the studio one day. This is a couple meetings in. Chet says, I'm going to be working at Studio B. He says, come by Monday afternoon at 2. And I go, okay. So I drive down to Studio B, and I walk in the back door, and I can see Chet sitting there. And he turns around, he got a cigar, and he goes, hey, Steve, come on in. And I look, and I'd only met Chet like twice. I'd only been around him a couple times. And I look through the glass of the control room, and Jerry Reed is sitting there.
Holy smokes.
I go, oh, my God, my hero, my other hero. And so I walk out. Chet says, come on. And we walk out into the big studio. And Chet goes, Jerry, this is Steve Wariner, a kid I'm working with, might be working with. This is Jerry Reed. And I go, hello, Jerry. And Chet goes, Steve, do that song I'm already taking for Jerry. And so I take Jerry's guitar and I sit down and I do I'm already taken. And when we get done, this is what Jerry Reed said. Well, Jerry and I later become like awesome friends, but I just didn't know him at all at this time. And Jerry looked at, I won't say the words he said, but I'll just say damn, but there was another word in front of it. But I let Jerry Reed goes, when I got done the last note, I go, and I'm like sitting there thinking nobody said a word. And Jerry goes, damn, Chester, sign this boy. What do you want? Effing blood? What do you want?
So you went from having no tracks, no cuts, to within a week, your whole life changed.
With Chet being my best friend in the world.
Man,
and he took me into Studio B. He took me into Studio B, and we cut some later, and we cut some tracks. He gave me reel-to-reel songs that were outtakes of some of his other artists on RCA. And he goes, pick out some songs at the key works that you like. And I went in and in the Studio B with Chet, an engineer, and me, and we cut tracks and I sang. He just wanted to hear my voice on tape. And then when I got done doing that, he said, pick up your guitar. He goes, I hear you play some of my stuff. And I go, yes, I do.
Yeah, that's got to be scary as hell.
Chet says, well, do something of mine. I want to hear you play. And I go,
not too intimidating.
And I play. He goes, play me something. And I played. I don't even know what I played, but I know one of the songs I played was the theme song. I had a classical guitar there, gut string, and I played the theme song from Mahogany, if you know that song. Do you know where you're going?
I know exactly. Yeah, that's a beautiful song. I didn't know Chet wrote that.
Well, he didn't. I mean, that wasn't one of his, but I did something of his, and then I did Mahogany, and I guess I had an arrangement worked up. I don't even know it now, but so that was my little audition for Chet, I guess, and he signed me later to my contract. Signed me to a deal with RCA and was my producer.
Holy cow.
Anyway, that was a long way to get around. That was a heck of a day for me out with Johnny Cash. That was
Johnny Cash and Waylon Jennings
all day long. And
cutting your songs.
Cutting 4 of my songs. And I remember I got a check for my first check I got from BMI. I formed a little publishing company right then, and I still have that same publishing company. Everything I've ever written is in one company all through the years. And I remember I got a check for like $40,000, my first check for writing those songs. And I went right away because I go, I'm going to blow this money on some guitars or something if I don't. And so I went right away and bought 6 acres of land in Kentucky.
Good for you.
I gave my mom and dad an acre, and they built a house on it.
Wow.
They never owned a house in their life until that point.
Very cool.
They always
man.
rented, so they bought a little. I gave them an acre, and they built a house on it.
You still have that land?
I sold it. My mom and dad both. We sold it years ago, and my mom and dad moved away, but they stayed in that same area. But anyway,
wow,
that was a heck of a day. That was like you say. I never thought of it in those terms. That was a lottery day for me, man.
So who did at the end of the day? It probably took you till the next 3-4 days to decompress from that. But who do you call? To say, hey, can't believe this is what happened to me today. This isn't even reality. It's not even reality to me. Who do you call when that happens? I
think I was calling all my friends, the ones I was close to. A lot of them, I was so close to Bob Lumen's band, and they were in on it. But yeah, that was the day. That was the day I was just boggled my mind. I kept thinking, man, I just got my first cuts. And then right after that, I got a Conway Twitty cut one of my songs like the next week. And I was like, damn. And I see pictures from that day. There's pictures from that day of Bob Luman, and I'm cut out of every picture.
Why? That's really weird.
I was just a skinny. They don't even know it's me. I'm cut. I saw one picture of Bob Luman, me, and Johnny Cash, and you could tell. You can just barely see my shoulder. I'm cut out of it. And but I was a 19-year-old kid. I was just the bass player, Bob's bass player.
Yeah.
I was just Bob's bass player on the session. I've never seen a picture of me from that day, and I would die to have. I know there's pictures out there from that day somewhere.
Man, what an incredible story!
And
wow.
I saw Johnny Cash many times after that, and he would always walk right up to me and go, "Hey, Steve." And a lot of my friends would be with me that didn't know that story, and they would go, "What the hell?" And Johnny Cash would always point me out and go, "Hey." He'd always walk over and shake my hand and come to me, and he was always really friendly to me, and I loved that guy. He was always so nice, and I think he remembered that day, but he also knew that he and Chet were big buddies. So,
so he knew you were close with Chet, and so you kind of like friends by osmosis, sort of.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he also remembered that day with Bob Luman. He knew, he was always super nice to me from then on.
Yeah, but I tell you what, the fact that like Glen pulled you up, and I'll tell you this, I had probably told 10 guys that are buddies with you that I was interviewing you, and everybody literally exact same thing. Man, Steve is the nicest guy around.
Oh man.
But that's
nice.
why guys do that. So you combine nice with competency with what you do.
Well,
it's easy to get behind people like that, to support them. And, it's like, that's the guys you want to work with, the guys that are nice. That's the guy you say, hey man, let me go give you a little bit extra here and give you a push.
Well, that's mighty nice to hear that.
I swear I'm not I'm not the guy to make stuff up anyway, but 10 guys told me that. Yeah. I mean,
very nice to hear.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? My dad was always a real people person. I enjoy it. I love, my wife laughs and goes, man, you just like talking to people. I go, that's what I do. I'm just a people kind of person. And so, but my dad was that way. He never met a stranger and, but hey man, it's a close knit thing we all have though, this guitar world, music world, isn't it? I mean, I love it. It's what we do. So,
hey, let's talk about your last record, All Over the Map. I really enjoyed listening to it. It's got a real fun mix of instrumentals and good songs. And I just want to talk about some of the songs on it that were my favorites. All right. So let's talk about the first track I want to talk is Meanwhile Back in Austin. Great instrumental. Of course, the second Eric Johnson starts playing, it's Eric Johnson because he's very unique, obviously. But I was curious, is there any backstory to that particular track?
I don't think so. Nothing big on that. I'll back up and say this. A good friend of mine named Steve Hennig, who had his father, Ray Hennig's Heart of Texas Music, a Fender dealer guy from way when Fender started, pretty much in Austin, Texas. And he introduced me to Eric years ago. I think it would have been in the 80s. So I've known Eric since the 80s. And didn't know him well, but that's when we met. And then through the years when I was in Austin or playing around Texas, I'd get in touch with Eric and we would catch up. And I played on I was on one of the last TV special things that Chet did. Eric was a guest and I was a guest, so we got to hang out. And Chet and Eric played. Well, we all played together, but Chet and Eric did a thing that day. And so anyway, we've just been friends a long time. And I started working on this record when I first started. Well, let me back up and say I did a record a few years ago called No More Mr. Nice Guy that was all instrumental. My first all guitar record for Arista. And at that point, I had Larry Carlton played on it with me and Richie Sambora, a lot of guitar guys, Leroy Parnell and Vince. But I tried to get Eric. I asked Eric to play on that record, and he was having some ear problems back. Remember when he was having some problems back several years ago, and he was getting over that. And so I didn't get to have him on that record, but I said, if I do another guitar project, I really want Eric to see if he's available. I want to see if he'll play on it. Well, when I started making this record, I had in mind, well, I need to have Eric on this record. I called him and I started messing around with this little piece that it felt like Eric. I was trying to come up with something that would be good for us to work on together. And so I came up with this couple little licks and some grooves, and I thought, wow, that really might work. That fits good for Eric. And so I called him and threw him the idea, and I said, well, I have this piece of music. And so, long story, we worked it out. I said, well, if it's where I can, I'll make it easier for you. I'll come to you. If it's okay, I'll rent your studio out, which he said, oh, don't worry. He just gave it to me. I flew down, brought an engineer, and that way I let Eric have all of his world, his guitars, because I wanted it to be his comfort zone. And so I flew down to Austin. We were already in the midst of making this record, like halfway done. And so I worked it between his touring, and I came down and cut at his studio. We took a day and went in and worked on it, rehearsed, and that's how it came about.
That was really cool of you to go down there. That was really nice.
I really wanted to make it his world, with all of his. Thinking of him bringing all of his gear here and stuff. I did everything else here, but a lot of it in my studio. But we cut some studios downtown too. But I thought, well, I know I've been to his studio a bunch, and I said, I know he's got all of his guitars lined up, and he's got his amps and stuff he wants. Turns out that he played piano on that track too.
Wow, I didn't really know he played piano.
If you listen, there's a beautiful some piano. We were sitting in the control room, and Eric goes, how he talks real soft. He goes, hey, Steve, I'm hearing a piano part on this. And I don't know if you know, but he plays incredible piano.
I did not know that at all.
Oh yeah. He plays, I like his piano playing as well as anything else. And so he goes, let me show you what I'm thinking. And he's got a beautiful Steinway sitting in his studio. And we just walk out there, and he goes, I'm thinking. And I go, oh my God, that's awesome. And so I go, sure. He goes, if you want to roll tape, we'll just put that on there. And I go, yeah, we will. And but anyway, he played piano and guitar on it.
And see, that's the inner. No, go ahead. Sorry. I apologize. Go ahead.
No, that's fine. I'm rambling here, and then it was fun. It was a fun day also because my engineer Julian King had never met Eric, and he was a huge fan. Brilliant engineer. He did the whole album, and so he flew down with me, and he was all excited too to hang out with Eric. And so when we got done, every part that Eric did, it just got better and better and changed and metamorphosized, and changed as I knew it would. And it just kept getting great and great. And then Eric, he's so humble. I've almost got it. I'm not quite where I love it. So finally we got to that point, and I go, Eric, I'm loving it. I think we have what we need. And I'm tickled to death. He goes, well, if you're happy, I go, oh yeah, I'm happy. And then he took us out to eat at one of his favorite restaurants. And Julian, of course, we all love that. And we hung out, and then we came home the next day and just had a great time. That's
the interplay, though, that you wouldn't have had. Piano part had you just said float, fly, do your track and fly it, upload it, whatever.
There's no question that wouldn't have happened. It wouldn't have been near as good if we'd done it and made him come here. Like you say, that piano just happened. I don't even have a piano, not a real piano in my studio. So anyway, you're exactly correct.
That's great.
So anyway, he was gracious. He's a sweet, sweet guy and one of my favorite people. Even aside from music, I just think the world of him as a person, and we're really good pals,
That's awesome. You got another song on there, CGP. That's like a hilarious song.
I know that's got some funny little lines, I think. I wrote that song one night. I was just playing around, and I was thinking, I've never done a CGP song, So I was just thinking, and just sometimes it happens this way where when you write, I was just sitting thinking. I remember sitting on the edge of my bed with my little my little guitar that I write with a lot, and I just the first words came out, CGP, Tommy John and me.
Yeah.
Then I go, oh, that fell out nice. It rolled off my tongue, and then I go, just like that, it goes, a proclamation saying so from Chester B. Oh my God, I'm writing this chorus. Everybody called him Chester B that knew him. Burton is Chet's middle name. So then I finished, like in 5 minutes, I had the chorus done. I go, well, that's cool. And then I go, well, this got to be on my album, you know. And then I started messing around with the verses. Next day, I think I wrote a verse and just kind of snowballed. And then I go, well, hell, I got to get the other CGBs on this, you know. That's a natural.
Yeah.
Then so I called up John and Tommy. Oh, yeah, well, let me know when. And so I started putting a track together, and then I brought those guys out here, gave them the rough tape of it, and let them live with it a little bit. And they came out, and I actually have the whole thing on film too. We filmed the whole day. And
dude, you ought to put that out on social media or something.
Yeah,
little snippets of that. Yeah, that's kind of cool.
You're exactly right. We should.
Yeah, do teasers. You know, part 1, part 2, part 3.
I don't even think that.
I'm a marketing guy. That's what that's the only way I think. It's kind of funny, man.
No, I got tons of cool stuff like that. I got a lot of me and Eric down in Austin.
Oh man, that's.
But anyway,
you can relaunch this
Tommy
album.
And John came out, and we nailed it, and they nailed it, and we kind of organized it, and turned out great. I just got a new Gretsch too. I played. It's the country western, the reissue of the old branded cowboy guitar, you know, and I played that on it, and it was fun. And really, all of us, the funnest part of all of it was all of us reminiscing and laughing about Chet. We all said, man, Chet's here with us in the room, you know. He's laughing at all of us. Nice try, boys, you know.
Hey, let me tell people about that song, because some of them may not know. Basically, CGP, Certified Guitar Player, that's the certification that Chet gave to only a handful of guys, as I said earlier. And so the only guys left are Steve, Tommy Emmanuel, and John Knowles. And so that's what Steve was referring to.
Yeah, it's funny, CGP. I've heard people say certified guitar picker or certified guitar player. I think Chet said picker. But how it started was Paul Yandell and Chet Atkins, they kind of come up with this idea. Well, let me back up. Chet had an album called Chet Atkins CGP. And somebody asked Chet, said, what's CGP? And Chet said, well, I never got a degree from Harvard or Vanderbilt or anywhere. He said, I never went to college, never got a degree. So I gave myself a degree. He said, I'm a certified guitar picker.
That's awesome.
And so I'm Chet Atkins CGP. And then Paul Yandell later said, Chet, at the annual convention they have here, the Chet convention they call it, Appreciation Society. Paul Yandell talked Chet he said, Chet, you should give these certifications out to some of your pals. And so Chet goes, that's a cool idea. So they gave Jerry Reed was the first, and then it went on from there. They every now and then, every few years, Chet would give, make another guy a CGP. And I'm gonna tell you this is for a fact. I know Chet became very ill and left us way too soon. But if he'd not gotten sick, there would be a lot more CGPs, because I know they were getting ready to. All of his pals, you know, he wanted them. They were all CGPs to him. You know, right. He just didn't get around to doing it. He passed in 2001.
Great song. Way it goes. I like the lyric in there. Some people talk when they ought to be listening.
Yeah, man. Well, that was right at when I wrote that, I'll be quite frank.
Yeah.
When I wrote that song, it was right at the height of all the political stuff, the presidential stuff. And it was right when every time I turned the TV on, I saw 100 guys on stage, all of them debating, trying to be the Republican nominee for president. And they were like 100 of them. They were all like bashing each other. And I go, man, some people ought to listen instead of talk, you know. I'm not a real political guy. I mean, I'm not necessarily, but in some cases I go, man, and all I'm talking about both sides of the aisle. Most politicians, they all need to be, if they just stop and listen to them all, and hear what the average person goes through or has to do, but none of them have a clue what the real world is like. So,
no,
but that's really on the whole album. This is the only really kind of political statement that I make, you know, and then as it progressed, I wanted it to be a real Little Feat kind of a Lowell George Little Feat kind of thing, you know, and groove. And then later I go, man, we got to have horns on this thing. This is so horns, you know. And then I was thinking of the whole concept of this record is to bring in a lot of my pals and friends. And Greg Martin, I just thought, look, Greg ought to play on this. And
you hear that slide, man.
So I called Greg, and he brought that 59 Les Paul. I think it's a 59.
It's a 58. I think it's a 58.
58. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. His
anyway,
Hank.
Yeah, it's Hank.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he came in and brought that, and my son Ryan was here. He loves Greg. They're good buddies, and we made a whole event out of it. He came out, and we took pictures and filmed and recorded and had a great time. We ate and laughed and had fun, as I always do with Greg Martin.
And you could hear his tone, man. It's the same like with Eric. You just hear that's Greg, you know, he's got such a specific.
Oh, yeah, no question. And you know what's funny on it, Craig, is when he walked in the door, I said, you know, and this is how stuff veers off and takes a turn, has a life of its own. But I told Greg, I said, you know, I'm hearing slide on this. And so he gets out a couple guitars and he's playing slide and it's really good, but it's not what I'm thinking it's going to be. I mean, definitely it's good. The good part's not it, but you know, and the more I'm hearing it, I'm going like, well, I thought I wanted slide, and that's really cool what he's playing, and the tone's great. But then at the last minute, I think he saw that I kept trying to get something that wasn't happening, and then Greg, being the smart guy he is, he goes, well, let me try something else. And he laid a slide down and just played. And I go, oh, my God, I love what you just played. So it really wasn't slide.
It wasn't slide. It sounded like slide.
What I was hearing, you know, it was more of just crunchy Les Paul guitar, I guess. But my mind was telling me slide, but Greg was awesome in everything he did. But it was me. I wanted something that I didn't realize I wanted. And he played the first take he played. I go, that's it. And he recorded it. And we go, well, we're done.
That's another guy so freaking humble and just respectful and just a kind human being, man.
Oh, yeah. We toured together all across Canada once, me and the Headhunter.
The Headhunter?
Yeah. We and Hank Jr., we played, 3 of us.
Oh, my God.
All across coast to coast Canada, man, one summer, I think it was. And at all the checkpoints, they would stop those guys. They'd send us on through. Yeah, go ahead. And then they would always stop those rock and rollers and want us to check their buses out, you know, looking for something, you know, those long-haired guys.
Yeah, long-haired hippie dudes. Yeah, I got to meet Greg in person. They were down here a while ago for one night. Poor guy. The night he comes down, it's an outdoor show. It's like 45 degrees.
Oh, my God.
It was like the one day it gets, you know, we had a little run of cold weather here in Tampa.
You probably never see 45 degrees in Tampa.
You know, it's not frequent for sure. It was, once in a blue moon, and poor Greg came down that day, and he's like got his hat on, and he's like, oh, my God. And it was because we haven't, this is our first show for the new year. He goes, we haven't played, you know, of course they don't need to rehearse, those guys, but
no.
Last song I want to talk about is Down Sawmill Road. Real pretty instrumental bluegrass and some really nice playing on there with you and Ricky. And I was curious, did you write that together, or what was the story with that?
I wrote that by myself. That song, I'm really fond of like open tunings, you know, and so on acoustic, I love open tunings and all different kinds. And I get that a lot from Chet because he did it a lot. I learned some tunings from him, but this one day I was just kind of messing around, and I believe it's an open G tuning, and I capoed it, I think, up a little bit. But anyway, it's basically an open G, I think, tuning, or A, I can't remember. But anyway, I put down a little groove, just a groove track to a guide track, and played my open tuning stuff. And then the more I played it, after I played it, then I started thinking of a name for it. And my mother, who had just passed not too long before that, I was thinking of her, and I thought, because it sounded rural, it sounded Kentucky, and I was thinking of seeing if Ricky would play on it. And there's the Kentucky connection too. So I go, my mom when she was a little girl, she lived on Sawmill Road. That's my road. It's an old country road, and the little house my mom was raised in is still there. And so a lot of times I'll go back home to see my brother and some of my relatives. I'll drive back in the country, and I'll go down Sawmill Road, and I'll just kind of peer at my mom's little house, a little modest, little old brown house sitting there. And so that's where the name came from. And then I called Ricky, and being the good buddy he is, he said, "Oh, yeah. He said, why don't you come out here and do it?" So I went out to Hendersonville. We picked some mutual time, and I went out to Hendersonville and recorded at his studio. And of course, he's got a beautiful place, nice microphones. And I sat in the control room, and he'd give me a couple takes. It took longer for us to drive out to Hendersonville than it did for him to do it.
That's a good problem to have, man.
Isn't that great?
Yeah, that's a nice problem.
He played it through once, and I go, "Ricky, that's awesome. I'm really happy
We're done.
You are." He played it through once, and then I go, and then he said, "Well, let me do another take just in case you want to, take something from this." And so he did another take, and then we left, and he took us to one of his favorite restaurants in Hendersonville, which was a Mediterranean, kind of Indian Mediterranean food. And we went, and all of us, a friend of mine who went with me, and some of the engineers and stuff, I took them all out to lunch. Or Ricky took us, and I'll put it that way. Because I told Ricky, I said, I go, "Well, at least let me buy you lunch." He wouldn't let me pay him or anything. So I go, "Well, I'm buying lunch." And he's a pal, man. He was so cool to do that, and all those engineers and everybody was gracious. And I mean, like I say, it took longer to drive out there.
Yeah, man. Well, it's a beautiful record. Everybody listening, please check out Steve's last record. It's called All Over the Map. Some great guitar playing there, some really melodic songs. And like I said, Steve's voice is perfect as always.
Thank you, man.
So you're originally from Noblesville, Indiana. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah. And now, when I was a kid there, Craig, that's just north of Indianapolis, about 20 miles or so, 15. But when I was a kid there, it was just, it's now it's kind of the north side of Indy, but when I was a kid growing up, that was the big trip into Indianapolis. My dad would go in every now and then to Indianapolis to go drive around the car lots or whatever, and it was like the big trip into the city. But it was a small little farm town back then. But now it's kind of just the north side,
Gotcha. What was your childhood like growing up? It sounded like great from what you said.
It was great. We moved all the time, and don't ask why. We moved and moved and moved, but we rented all the time. So we were always moving, kind of nomads around that same area. So I think looking back on it, it really helped mold my personality, because I was always having to be the new kid in the class. I'd had to introduce myself. So
you got, so that's how it helped you to become so friendly and gregarious and adaptable.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Very cool.
I went to every school but one in that whole area. And then once we moved, quite frankly, my mom and dad were having some marital issues, and we moved to Louisville, Kentucky for about a year and a half, a little less than a year, or a little more than a year, I guess. Really a tumultuous time for me, because it was 1967, 68, right through there. Louisville was having a lot of racial riots. It was took me out of my comfort zone, and it's one of those things that was like abrupt. It wasn't discussed, It's just like, "Oh, we're moving tomorrow."
Yeah.
And I remember my dad sold my little, wasn't mine, but he sold the little Dan Electro bass. I remember I was in tears over that. He sold it to a friend, and I remember, because we were moving, I think it probably to move,
Sure.
He sold that little Dan Electro bass. I would kill to have that now. It's what I learned to play on. But anyway, we moved to Louisville. My Uncle Jimmy, who I spoke about earlier, they already lived in Louisville. So, and then my dad had we had cousins that lived there too, so we had a little bit of family. But we lived in a really rough part of town, and it was hard, man. That was a hard year for me, going to school, and got in some fights, got beat up a little bit, but I guess that's all character builders.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that, how you said that helped you, because you could have gone both ways. Because, I've just as many times talked to people, and they said, "Yeah, man, I kept moving around. So it was really hard for me to have friends, and I was quiet." So it's always, it's just so interesting to see,
how people handle things.
Yeah. And, some people are their coping skills are different. And like, it sounds like you were able to turn, lemons into lemonade.
Well, what I did at that point, I was in the 6th grade and I immersed myself into music big time. And I think that's when I really dug in deep, because I could tell you at that point, I don't know how, because there's no internet or no social, there was nothing, but I don't know how, but I could tell you who played on every record out of Nashville. I knew all the session guys. I knew, Lloyd Green was coming into his own at that point on steel guitar with those Johnny Paycheck records. I go, yep, that's Lloyd Green. That's Buddy Harman playing drums on that. That's Bob Moore. I don't know how, but I knew it. And my uncle at that point, which like I was telling you earlier, he lived a block away from us, or like the next street over. And he was going down every weekend in that summer to play on this live radio show. And then that night he would drive right after the radio show. He would drive down to Bowling Green, which is a couple hours from where he lived, or in Kentucky, down in the country. And we would go to Bowling Green and do that live television show. So I was like, well, I'm in. They needed a drummer. And I said, that was my escape.
Yeah, of course. Who the hell wants to deal with
my uncle
marital stuff with parents?
That whole summer, man, I went with my uncle and played in his band, and it was fabulous. I wouldn't trade that for anything. And I loaded up my crappy little Trixon drums in his Chevelle, and we would take off for the country,
Did you have any brothers or sisters?
Yeah, I got 3 brothers and a sister.
Oh, it's a big family.
And my oldest brother is the one I was telling you about that would always call me and tell me he was Merle Haggard or something. That's Kenny, the prankster.
Does he still do that?
He still is a prankster somewhat. My youngest brother, Terry, we played together since day one. He's a guitar player, drummer, singer, really good singer. It's that blood harmony kind of thing. He can sound just like me, and we got really good harmony and stuff. He's been on a lot of my records, and he travels still with me when we do band stuff. He still is in the band.
That's really cool, man.
Yep.
We're
really close.
That's great.
And then I got another brother who is an artist. He's a fine, he used to be an illustrator more, but he does more fine arts, and he's a painter and an artist and a starving artist, and he lives there in Nashville. And then my sister she lives in Indiana, where my oldest brother lives, and still in Noblesville, and she's a homemaker up there. And
that's cool,
single,
man.
Now, but so yep.
That's nice, man.
We drove. I'm sure us 4 boys drove her crazy. There's no question on that. We drove her nuts.
Oh yeah,
4 boys and 1 girl.
That's got to be rough, man.
God bless her.
Let me ask you this. Everybody makes, I call it paying tuition in your career. You make mistakes. And I was curious if you'd be kind enough to maybe share 1 or 2 mistakes you made and the lessons you learned from them on the way up.
That's a great question. I think the first thing that pops in my mind, I think the only critical thing that I would do differently is, if I had it to go back, which you can never do, if I could do it, I would. I was very hesitant and reluctant to get management. I went a long time with no management, and in those days, a lot of artists did that. But when I first started having hits, I was having hit records and didn't even have a manager. And I think, like I say, a lot of people, it was kind of the trend then, but I would certainly, if I went back and could do it, I would have that in place, because record labels, they can take advantage of that in some ways.
Yeah.
Or let me rephrase that. I had a great relationship with RCA, but I think if you have a manager, a lot of times they can be the buffer, they can be the bad guy and help you navigate through some things and negotiate, get the records out.
Yeah, they negotiate for you in because they know what buttons to push and what.
Right,
Yeah.
And you need that guidance, and I didn't have that. I went a long time without any of the guidance from a management team or whatever, and I wish I think if that's about the only thing that sticks out to me.
But then again, I hear stories of guys who like, they say something like, man, my managers really screwed me. I've never had any luck with them. So like 6 of one, half a dozen of the other.
Absolutely. I've been with managers, I've had several managers through the years. So yeah,
which wolf eats the bigger piece. Sometimes it's, better the devil known than the devil unknown,
Dancing with the devil.
Yeah, man. It's like, which one, throw a
lot of times that's just a necessary evil. I mean, heck, the whole record business is a necessary evil in some ways.
Yeah, sure.
So at that point, anyway, back in those days, it's all. But and I remember once when Chet Atkins came to me when I was hitting him up to sign me to the label, I didn't realize that he was going to sign me up and he wasn't going to be my producer. And one of the things, turning that around, one of the things that I did right, it was when Chet said, we want to sign you to the label, but we want this guy to produce you. And I go, what? I was like astounded that he didn't say, and I'm going to produce you. And I said, no. I remember sticking up and just saying, well, Chet, I'm not interested if you're not producing me. I said that.
Good for you.
And if he had said, no, I'm not going to produce you, then I would have either been without a label or I would have went with whatever, with whoever. But I remember saying, no, if you're producing me and I really want you. And he goes, well, let's go in and cut a few things and we'll see what happens. And that's how it started. So
yeah, that's good that you stood up for yourself. But that's one of the things that I did right. Yeah. Maybe I wonder why he wasn't just assumed that, maybe because like he was afraid ethically he didn't want the label to think, hey, I'm bringing these guys in because I want to produce them. It sounds like the stand-up guy like that he's wanted to be arm's length about it. Guy.
Yeah. But I know the reason. I'll tell you the reason. And it's okay to talk about this. I can tell you. I know. I didn't know at the time, but it was explained to me later, like 2 years later. I realized that he was in a position where he was at the twilight of his record executive career. And they were nudging him away. And he was, quite frankly, he told me this. He goes, I'm trying to step away and not be so busy. He goes, I've been in the studio for 100 years, being responsible for so many artists. He goes, I'm really wanting to relax and not do this so much. And then here I come going like, well, I want you to produce me. And so at the same time, the label was nudging him away because they had brought in another head of the label to take his place. And I didn't know all that politics stuff was going on. Another thing a manager could have navigated me through.
Yeah. But if you hadn't had that relationship with him, because you had that relationship with him, I'm sure it was not a push for him to, he's probably happy to do that.
He kicked the can down the road because he produced a couple sessions on me, and we put out a couple singles. They didn't do anything, and then he finally brought me in and says, "You need to go with another producer.
Okay,
you'll never have a hit as long as I'm producing you." And I go, "What?" And he goes, "Well, it's a politic thing. I'm sort of
okay. They didn't
transition. You need to be playing politics with these guys, not with me."
Yeah,
and I understood that. And it's funny, Craig. My first record with another producer was my first top 10 hit. I had my first record the minute I stepped away from Chet.
Well,
and then I was still playing bass with him, and he brought me into we had a song called Your Memory that was a top 10 hit. First one, I was still touring with him playing bass, and he pulls me into his office one day and says, "Steve, you got your first hit." And I go, "Yes, sir." He goes, "You're fired." I go, "What?" He goes, "You're fired from the band." I go, "Oh my God." He fired me. He goes, "You need to go out and do your own stuff."
Yeah. So he was the mama bird pushing you out the nest.
Yeah, exactly. And he laughed about that and brought that up for his whole rest of his life. "Yeah, I fired you that time, remember?" He loved that. He loved firing me.
Hey man, let's talk gear for a few minutes. This might be an impossible question for you. The question is, what's your go-to guitar right now, and what other two guitars would round out your top three?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think, totally it would be, I'd have to look at for what purpose, if you're in the studio, right now, I have a 54 Tele that is, if I'm doing anything, like I just played it on a John Schneider, Dukes of Hazzards. I just played on his record recently. And I took that and played it because I knew it needed a real spanky Telecaster chicken picking Telecaster thing. So if I got anything that's like that, it's my 54 Tele. And
is it beat up?
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It must be awesome
it's
looking.
It's all
man.
Banged up and beat up. It's around here somewhere.
Yeah, man. If you got it, let's take a look.
Yeah, I can find it real quick if you want to look at it. But anyway, that's my go-to on that. Or if it's something that's more mellow or something, I've got I'll take I got a brown Country Gentleman Gretsch that I like to play. It's a reissue of 59 Country Gent. I'll play that if it's a Gretschy kind of thing. And then a lot of times I've got a B-bender. Joe Glazer made me a B-bender Tele. He made it for me in the mid '80s, and it's got a B-bender on it, of course. And a lot of times I'll play that on twangy stuff if I want a B-bender kind of part, which for a while was kind of my thing. On a lot of my records, I was playing a lot of early records in the early to mid '80s. I was playing a lot of B-bender kind of parts on my records, Midnight Fire and Heart Trouble, and it was kind of Some Fools Never Learn. Some of my hits had a lot of B-bender on it. It was fun watching local bands do it and try to play it without
a B-bender.
They didn't realize it had a B-bender on it, So
Joe doesn't make guitars anymore, I don't think, right?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
He just recently did a B-bender for me on another Tele, but he'll do. But I don't think he makes.
I don't think he makes them.
I think Joe's busy with his machine and with his traveling the world and having fun, and good for him. He's done it a long time.
Sweet guy, real sweet guy.
Yeah, he is.
You have any cool or interesting stories behind how you got any of your guitars?
Yeah, almost every one of them, probably. I tell you one story that's probably the most fascinating story to me. I was promised to not talk about it, and I won't go into detail with who and names and stuff, but because I promised. But many years ago, I was doing a show in East Tennessee, and we had an email from a young lady that said, "We're coming to your show. My mom and I are coming to your show. We were doing 2 shows this day. Next month, we're coming to your show. We're going to come to the first show, and my mom is bringing a guitar that she wants to give you." It was my dad's, and he passed away recently. And we got a few of his guitars, and he wanted them to go certain places. And this one, it has to go to Steve Wariner. I didn't know him. I had no idea who these people were. And long story.
Did you know the guitar player? Had you heard of the guitar?
No.
Oh, you never heard of him? Okay.
No, I never. They never even mentioned his name in the email. They just said, "We got a guitar my dad wanted you to have, and my mom and I are coming." And so my guitar tech comes. I told him to meet at the front of house guy, and between shows, my guitar tech came backstage and said, "There's a lady here, a young lady and an elderly lady, and they have a guitar case." And the guitar guy, I go, "What kind of case is it?" And he says it's a 70s Tolex Fender case. And I go, "Oh, okay." They come back. Well, I won't go into the whole story, bore you, but we open up that case, Craig, and it's just got that musty smell. And the more I'm looking at this Tele, I'm going like, wow, this is an old Tele. And it turns out that the lady told me, said, "My husband got this guitar from Leo Fender himself." That's her words.
Holy smokes.
And so I start looking at this guitar, and I'm going like, damn, this is an old guitar. And the more I looked, I realized that I had suspicions that it was a no-caster.
Is that the one you just talked about, the 54 Tele?
No, this is a 51.
Okay.
The no-caster would be 51. And so the more I'm looking at it, I'm going like, damn. And then so she says, we were on the West Coast. My husband played in a Western swing band, and blah, blah, blah. We played, she got this from Leo himself. And she explained to me that we had about 3 or 4 guitars that he wanted this one to go here, this one here, and this one really, really wanted you to have it. And the more I'm looking, I'm going like, I don't see, all it says is Fender on the head. It don't say Telecaster or anything, just Fender. And then I see the string tree, which told me it was a no-caster, or my suspicions were. And so I told her, I said, well, this is a very old guitar. And I said, Miss So-and-so, I said, you could make some money if you wanted to sell this guitar. I don't want to be, you could, and I try to be nice and honest. And I wanted to make sure they knew that. And she goes, oh, we know that. She goes, that was his wishes, and we're doing exactly. He died of cancer like 5 years prior, and she goes, we know that, but this is where he wanted it to wind up, and that's what we're doing. And so I go, oh, I was in tears, and so I brought them on stage for the second show. They were practically my piano player for the second show. They sat right by the piano.
That's so cool.
And so we took it. I got it back home, and Jeff Sin took it. We took the neck off, and it penciled in. It says TG. That's all Fender's. Tony Gonzalez, TG 32351 is penciled in the neck.
Holy smokes!
So it was that period of which you know about, I'm sure, Craig, but it was that period of 6 months when Fender was told they couldn't have a guitar called a Broadcaster because Gretsch already had one. And so it was that period of time that Fender, there was no Telecaster yet. And so after that, it was that few months period of guitars that got out there. And she gave me a booklet of pictures of her husband playing that guitar. I still have a booklet of pictures, and he's playing that guitar in swing bands, and it's brand new, and he's real young. And there's one picture of him with Tommy Duncan from the Bob Wills Band.
Very cool.
And there's a picture of him with Merle Travis in that book. So he was playing with a lot of interesting people. Made sense that he could have gotten it from Leo Fender. I'm not saying he did, but it sure made sense that he could have, because he was hanging out with Tommy Duncan and Merle Travis.
And he was out on the West Coast.
And he's on the West Coast, and it was cool. They had a steel guitar player in the band with no pedals, they had the little Western suits on, and that little booklet of pictures means I stayed in touch with her too for a long time. She's gone now, but the first time I played it on the Grand Ole Opry, I told her, I said, well, I'll tell you this right now. This guitar will be loved, respected, and played in honor of your husband. And she was in tears, and she goes, well, that's what he wanted. She said he knew that would be the case. And I said, well, this guitar will be loved. And I said, and I'll tell you what else will happen. This guitar will be on the Grand Ole Opry next time I play the Opry.
That's
and
so cool.
If you guys want to come up, you be my guest. And I brought him out to the Opry with me, and I played her husband's guitar on the Opry that night.
Man, that is such a nice story, man.
Isn't that cool? And so I got him pictures and got him backstage at the Opry, and I keep all those pictures of her husband in the case, and a little booklet in the case with it, and letters that she wrote. We corresponded for a long time, and I got all those letters, and everything's in that case with it, and it's a funky, beat up old guitar.
That's a great story. It's really nice that you did those things. It's the right thing to do, and honoring them. Yeah, that was really cool.
And I tell you, that's something that guitar will never be. I'll never make money off that guitar, I just won't, and because I'll donate it or pass it on to somebody else or something. It'll be in a museum, or if I'm worthy ever to have a space like that. But that's the way that stuff has to be. It has to be passed on and respected.
Yeah, totally, 100%, absolutely. What's the best guitar and the best amp you've ever owned or played?
Wow. I have to be honest, the best amp, I've got two of these amps, and I thank Reggie Young for it, because I have two 65 Blackface Deluxes.
Nice.
And that's my Desert Island amp.
Yeah.
That I've also got a Blackface, about a 65 or 6 Princeton amp that I love too, that Todd Sharp, Todd-ized, I call it. He Todd-ized it. And it's, he does a little thing where he adds a power. I think he adds a power tube and turns it into from a 10-inch to a 12-inch speaker. It's a little trick he does. It's fabulous. I've AB'd many Princeton's both ways, and trust me on it, it's badass. And that's one of those amps would be my road amp. I have a road amp and a studio amp and a road amp of the Blackface Deluxes, and my road amp is the bad boy. That's the one it's the one that sounds the best.
That's so cool.
And then guitar wise, I would have to say my favorite guitar was my dad's, my Jazzmaster.
Jazzmaster, that's nice, man.
I mean, it's certainly not the best guitar.
No, it feels
hopefully my dad don't hear that. It's not the best guitar, but it's the coolest, because I remember when my dad brought that through the door at my house, and I learned to play on it. My dad just loved that guitar. And you know what's funny, Craig? At that time this was 60s, maybe one or two, whenever. But my dad, at that time, everybody put their names on their guitars with mailbox letters or whatever. My dad had actually, I watched him do this as a kid. I was in the 3rd grade. He took some kind of glue. My dad's name was Roy, and he started making an R with glue, and he was going to put sparkle stuff on it, glitter on the glue. Yeah. And he got as far as the R, and he changed his mind. He goes, "Nah, I'm not going to do that." And
good move, Roy.
But you can still barely see the R, in the finish, and I love that. I love it. You can still see the R.
You can see that,
yeah. And but second to that would be I've got some guitars that Chet gave me. I've got some of his guitars.
That's really cool.
It would be my dad's, and then, gosh, I'd have to say my favorite is my dad's because that was his. And I watched him play that guitar many, many times, and he taught me on that guitar, and I learned to play on it. And I used to play it in bands too, and I would dream that it was a Telecaster. I played in these bands one band I played in, this guy did almost 90% all Merle Haggard songs. So I was trying to be James Burton. Yeah. And in my mind, I was playing a Telecaster, but we all knew it was a Jazzmaster, so.
That's what a blessing, though. You know how many out of the 300 players I've interviewed, maybe one or two other guys have a situation like this where they have, their first guitar, their dad's guitar. So you're in a very small minority. So what a cool thing, man.
I'm really lucky.
A blessing,
that got hung on to, and I've got my dad's old fiddle too. I got it too. He had about 3 fiddles, but I've got one of them.
That's nice, man.
Cool. I don't have much, but I don't have much from either parent, but I do have those. So,
Desert Island discs. If I asked you to pick your top 3 Desert Island discs, here's the good news: no particular order, and knowing it could change tomorrow. So it's like your Desert Island disc for this moment in time. Only. Wow. Knee-jerk reaction.
My first thing I thought of was Chet Atkins in Hollywood. Man, I love that record. I love that disc. And golly, there are so many good. The problem with me, I'm like you, Craig. I bet you're like me. I love all kinds of music. I love so many styles of music.
What mood are you in for that minute?
I mean, I thought of Stevie Wonder's Songs in the Key of Life. That's a great album. Eagles, Hotel California is fantastic.
Yeah, sure is.
There's some great guitar on that record. And I've got a box set of Glen Campbell that maybe every now and then I'll just pop that on and listen. It's a whole works of Glen, that and in fact, actually, I'm on that record. I wouldn't pick it because of that, but I'm lucky that I got our track is on it. But man, those are a few that my first thoughts. I listened to in California the other day. My daughter out there, she loves Michael Jackson, and she put on not Thriller, but what's the one right before Thriller? It was, and I'm going to buy that record. I'm like, damn, that's such a good. Quincy Jones, man, hit it out of the freaking park. It's such a great record. Anyway, it's the record before Thriller. It was. Anyway, I mean, I'm rambling, and I don't know if I answered you.
No, it's good. No, you totally did.
I think that Chet in Hollywood was. When I toured with Chet, we did a couple songs from that record, and he still, especially when we would play with symphony, half of our dates were with symphony orchestras with Chet. Wow. And so he would do, when we did symphony dates, as he called them, we'd do some of that album. And he still had the original charts from those days, the string charts. And it was we did a Fats Waller song called Jitterbug Waltz that was off the charts, man, those string arrangement. And I sat right in front of the cellos. It's just like, I couldn't even play bass for listening. I could feel the cellos. I didn't even hear them. I felt them, So I had the best seat in the house every night, man.
Steve, what have you learned about yourself throughout this entire journey? Things about yourself.
Wow. I think one of the things I've learned to do slowly, I think over the years, is trust myself, especially making music and recording, writing. I think the the better I've gotten at writing and composing music, I think the more I've learned to trust myself for sure. I used to second guess myself a lot, and I think I would second guess myself right out of some cool stuff, because and I'd think, well, what if maybe I'm going too far, maybe, instead of just being secure and just going like, that's good stuff, I think as I've gotten older too, I don't necessarily. I think I'm actually a better player as I've gotten older. I think I'm a better player. I don't think I may not play as fast or as all that flashy so much possibly, but I do think I'm playing better and singing better, to be quite honest with you. And I think because I'm smarter, I think I choose my stuff better,
Yeah.
So I think as you get older, that's the stuff you learn. I think those things, and I think I've just make choices better. Like when I was younger, I remember making records. I would sing that high note. It was as high as I could, my possible ceiling of and I did it just because I could, I think,
Yeah.
And I go, I'm going to show off on this record. And as I got older, I go like, man, we're not getting paid by the notes here. Chet used to say that, like somebody play a real flashy guitar solo, and Chet real calmly would say, sounds like he's getting paid by the note. And that, so I think I learned that, and just to kind of trust myself. I would say that's musically speaking, that's probably the biggest lesson. I think that comes from experience, though, right? I mean, as you go along, and I tell you one thing I've learned. I've tried to preach this to not that they don't listen, they do, but I've tried to, and I tell young people this too, is to have something else. Don't just have one thing, guitars and amps, and that's it. Trust me, I love that stuff as great as anyone else. I do, man. And for years and years, I only could say this because that was me when I was younger. There wasn't anything else in the world. It was 24/7. But I've learned as I've gotten older to have other things in my life that make me happy and stuff that make me smile. I'm getting heavy on you here, but
no, it's just good.
You know what I mean, though.
I
paint. I paint and draw, and
what kind of painting?
I do a little bit of everything. I cartoon a little bit, and I do watercolors, and I've been dabbling. I know mostly about watercolors and pen and ink, and that kind of. I've got a little style that I've kind of do over the years of pen and ink and watercolor style. Some little technique things that I do, and I just do it for fun, and I'll give them away or presents or something. But there's a couple of mediums that I'm not familiar with. I've kind of been dabbling with some acrylic stuff, things that I'm not real comfortable with that make me, well, let me just learn and try this. And I'll toss some things away just because I'm experimenting and playing around. But I guess my whole point is have something else up your sleeve that you enjoy, that you can, like what I'll do is I'll come up here in the studio and play around with guitars and amps and write songs and make demos and make a record or whatever. And then I'll do that for 5 days and wear myself out. And then I'll go, man, I don't want to see music stuff for a while. Then I'll go to my pool house out there, which I have set up as an art little studio. And I'll go out there for a couple of days, and then I'll just paint. And I'll turn the radio on, listen to music, and just paint. And Karen will yell at me and say, hey, it's time for dinner. Come in, and it's already like, I just got out of here. How did this happen? The time went so fast. So after 2 or 3 days of just that, then I'll go, man, I want to go play some music. I'm dying to get my hands on my guitar. I've been away from it for 2 days. So my point is it's good to have a little distraction, I think, whatever it might be,
Yeah. I like drawing. It's very relaxing.
Oh, yeah. Oh, cool.
Really relaxing.
Hey, I do too. I've always done it. My dad I got it from my dad because all my brothers draw. I told you I have a brother that's an artist.
Yeah.
My younger brother, Terry, who's in the band, he cartoons and draws like crazy. And it's just something we've always done, kind of like music. It's just, we've always done it. So that's cool. Yeah, it is very relaxing. And so.
Best childhood memory.
Oh, wow. Well, there's a bunch, I remember my dad, my dad would load us all in. He had a 58 Ford, and we would drive. All of our vacations, we lived in Indiana, so all of our vacations, my mom and dad would seem to go back to their home place, which turned out to be our pseudo home place, I guess, by default, but I remember a few summers, spending, particularly, I guess one summer in particular, it would have to be early 60s, like 63, 4, right through there. But my mom and dad, they rented a cabin down in Kentucky and near where they're from. They're way in the woods, and we loaded into this old 58 blue Ford and took off for Kentucky from Indiana. And I remember that being a real good summer. For some reason, a lot happened. It was just that sticks out in my mind. There's a bunch of real good ones, but we didn't travel a lot. We didn't do as a kid. We didn't really take a lot of trips or anything. If we did, we would go to their home place and visit all. My dad had so many siblings that we'd go visit.
Yeah.
We'd be like, hey, we're here. Knock, knock. We're here to, that sort of thing. So, but those are great memories because it always incorporated music. There was always somebody playing music, and so that was always great for me. I always loved that. But I mean, gosh, a lot of good memories. One, excuse me, one memory I have is we moved around a lot, as I think I mentioned earlier, but
yeah.
we lived in this one place we probably lived the longest, 892 South 8th Street. I remember the address. and we lived, the street had a railroad track that came right down the middle of the street. In other words, you could look up down the road, it would veer off a little bit to the side, but that railroad track basically goes right down through the middle of my town and right down through the heart of downtown. And so you could be driving along and look up and there'd be a train coming and you just have to make way for it. It came through slowly, it came by our house and would rumble our house sometimes, you'd feel it. And that was a great memory for me. I like that train. And the guy in the summertime, the caboose guy, whatever you call it, the brakeman or whatever, he would, when the weather was great, some kids down our block would come out and he would throw suckers and candy at us.
Oh, that's cool.
That was pretty cool. As soon as we heard the train, we go, oh, let's go get on the sidewalk. He liked all of us kids, so he would throw, and they were Tootsie Pops, and that's like the suckers, and we were like, man, I got to get the chocolate one, So
that's cool,
that's
man.
A great memory.
That is a good memory. Tell me something about yourself people would either be surprised to hear or might find a little odd. Probably need to get your wife back in for this one.
Yeah, she could tell you all kinds of stuff. Yeah, she definitely could. I think they would be surprised. A lot of folks would be surprised I don't even know if this is a word, Craig, but how untechnical I am, how unhandy, I guess you'd say. I mean, our toilet breaks and I go, Karen, come and help me.
Hey, someone's got to do it.
I'm so unhandy with stuff. I called my friend Tim. He's real good at everything, but I'm not really good. I've never been trained in anything but music. I've never done. I recently was in I was called for jury duty, and I've gotten out of it over the years, because I was touring or this excuse or that. Well, this time I go, you know what? I need to do my civic duty.
Yeah.
It was a big trial and it was a federal case. And this was a couple of years ago. But I wound up, I thought they'll never call me anyway, but they kept me. 40 people and they kept me. And I go, I'm on this trial. We went right into a trial, didn't even go home. I went right into it. But anyway, I really enjoyed it. And I think everybody should do their civic duty. But anyway, they asked, it was a workplace kind of case. And they asked me about what kind of jobs what do you do now? And what kind of jobs have you ever had? And I was like going, oh no. And I hated to answer, but I had to say, I've never done anything ever but music. I've never hit a lick of anything but music, and I've worked real hard at that. But,
sure. Yeah.
But anyway, that was funny.
How long that trial last?
It lasted about 2 weeks.
Wow. That's you made up for your civic duty, man.
Maybe almost 2 weeks. Not quite, but almost 2 weeks. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was funny. The judge was funny. they didn't know who I was. The lawyers, I don't think. I wasn't sure. I was thinking I didn't expect anyone in the courtroom to, but when they were trying out potential jurors, they asked. There's a workplace kind of lawsuit, and they were asking me working kind of questions. And I thought, when I tell them, when they get to the bottom of what I do, they won't keep me, and I'll be damned. They sure did. But the judge made a comment and said, and I bet the judge knew exactly who I was, because he made a comment. The whole place looked at me. He goes, I bet he's the only guy in this room that's got 4 Grammys. Or the only guy in this building that has 4 Grammys. When the lawyer asked me what.
Oh yeah, obviously he knew you for sure.
Yeah, and I go, uh-oh. I went like this. I went, oh no. And I go, well, they won't keep me now, and I'll be damned they did. So
you know what? Because you probably had no bias. You had no workplace experience, so you had no bias one way or another. That
might be a big part. Yeah, I never thought of it that way, looking at it that way. So yeah, but it was interesting.
Fresh eyes.
I'm glad I did it.
Well, cool, man. Hey, what's a perfect day for you?
Man, a perfect day is to not have anything scheduled. I'm
especially interviews.
No, I didn't say that, Greg. I didn't say the I word, man. Come on. No, not have I think a schedule is me and my wife Karen. That's our greatest annoyance, is to have I don't mean it, definitely not interview, but I mean just you got to go do this, or you got 10 things scheduled today, because that's usually our day. We have so much, and it's just part of it's the nature of the beast, and so I think a day that's not a lot on your docket, where I can go play around up here in the studio, change some strings, and work on. I always have about 2 or 3 little demos going. I'm working on new songs I've written. So my perfect day would be come up here, work on a few songs, put a guitar part down, maybe do a vocal or harmony part. Okay, and I'll have lunch and take a break. I may go paint a couple of hours out there. I got this painting. I do have a painting going right now. This huge acrylic painting I'm working on.
Of what?
It's a landscape. It's a huge, but we went a couple years ago. We took off and went to Yellowstone Park.
Oh, it's beautiful there, man.
And this I'll dip back into things that people would be surprised to know about me just for 2 seconds. But about 3 years ago, we bought a little RV. My wife and I bought an RV, and that's about a 28-footer. It's perfect for both of us to drive if we want. She really don't drive it, but if we want, she could. It's easy. It's a diesel engine. It's perfect for 2 people. And we bought it and took off to Yellowstone Park. And it goes back also to no schedule. We didn't have any kind of itinerary. We just took off. We had a month to be there and back. We had a month, and we just took off and go, oh, there's a guitar store over here in this little town. Let's go. We'd go. And she quilts. My wife quilts. Oh, there's a quilt store over here. Let's check it out. And we went all the way to Yellowstone Park doing that. No schedules.
That's fantastic, man.
And it was the coolest thing we've ever done. And so anyway, this painting I'm doing is kind of Yellowstone Park. It's buffalo. It's mountains in the back. It's very colorful. And when I get it finished, I'll show it to you. I'm about 90% done. But it's if you look out into the foreground, you can see buffalo spread out. As you really see out there, you can see buffalo just everywhere. And then way out in the back are these mountains that are real purple, and the sky's real colorful, reds and yellows. And
I smell limited edition Steve Wariner paintings for sale.
One of my friends once said, "Oh, I like your painting. Only problem is I can see the numbers showing through. I can see your numbers showing through."
That's hilarious.
He was a drummer too, by the way. So.
Oh my God. That's funny, man.
But that would be a perfect day. And then my wife would make a beautiful dinner. She cooks great. So she makes a good dinner, and we settle in and watch a movie that night. That'd be a good day. I mean, that'd be.
Yeah, no agenda is good, man. Always
low key, not a lot going on. So,
happiest moment or time in your life?
Well, my first flash went to when you said that. My first flash went to when I was, and I know there's several, but probably the one I thought of first was, I guess I was thinking of my parents, because I was thinking of when I was asked to be a member of the Grand Ole Opry and I was inducted. Bill Anderson was the inductee, and he made me a member of the Grand Ole Opry. My mom and dad and all my brothers and my sister were there. And we were all real ecstatic. My family was all together and happy. That was 96 when that happened. And also my guitar player for that evening I looked behind me, and my guitar player was Chet Atkins in my band that night.
Wow. So, that's a pretty perfect.
Yeah, I asked Chet, I said, would you go play guitar, be my guitar player? He goes, heck yeah, I'll do it.
That is so cool.
And Bill Anderson inducted me, and I was trying to make some kind of real humble, sincere little speech. I don't even remember what I said. I was so nervous, but I remember I was just speaking and saying all this stuff. I'm going to try to be, blah, blah. And I think Chet saw I was rambling, and he just bends over and he goes, I think it's time to sing now.
Saved by the bell.
Oh, yes, exactly.
That's good, man.
So, but I guess that happy moment was, number one, that was a dream forever to be a member of that great institution, but also I remember my parents being there. My dad was beaming with pride because that's what he wanted to do. He was living it through me, and I saw him hanging out with Chet and Grandpa Jones and Porter Wagner and all these opera greats. And I was thinking, how cool is this? My dad's just like one of those guys. My mom, too, she was over there talking to folks. They had a big party for me and stuff. So that was and all my brothers, and everybody was happy, and it was healthy. It's great.
That's nice, man. That is a really nice moment. Thank you for sharing that, man.
Yeah, man.
What's the most important thing your dad taught you?
I loved, it probably wasn't something he said, but it's something I observed. And I guess that's the case. That's what we do as parents, I guess. We just teach by example. But I think main thing my dad taught me, the gift of music is one of the big things he gave me. But what he taught me, I think, was I just watched him with people. He was great with people. I mean, if you knew my dad, you just loved him. He was just great with people and and he did it sincerely. It wasn't anything contrived. He just really, really enjoyed laughing, and he always had a smile on his face right till the end. Even he was smiling and just happy, with people, and he wanted people around him. He wanted very social, and I think I get that from him, but I learned it from him too. I think and he was one of those guys that could adapt, whatever the situation. No problem. I'll adapt and fit into this situation. I'll bounce off and rebound, and no worries, whatever comes my way. He was excellent at that. He could adapt and to whatever might be thrown at him. So great with people, though. I think that's main thing I learned from him. And he taught me a ton, though, believe it or not. I mean, believe it. He taught me a ton on guitar as a little kid. And I was soaking it up as fast as I could. He was a good player and, really had a lot of good fundamentals. I don't even know if he understood, the technical parts of it. He probably couldn't, you know what I mean? I don't mean this in a bad way, but I don't know if he knew technically. He wasn't a formal, he taught musical guy, but he sure knew he knew the bricks and mortar of it. He knew music very well and was a really good teacher.
That's a great gift that I think that's probably the most valuable skill you could have. It's probably getting along with people, man. Yeah,
I think so too. And everybody that knew him loved him at work or whatever he did. And he was always, he made people smile and laugh, and he was just a funny guy, real funny guy,
That's
had
awesome.
A great sense of humor.
How about Mom? What's the most important thing she taught you?
Her whole thing was family. I mean, totally. She taught me a lot about family, that was her world. There wasn't anything else but her kids, her little chicks, she called it. She goes, all my little chicks are back home. She loved it when we were all together.
That's cute.
And that's all she lived for. So I learned a lot with her because I went through 2 years of her being like very sick at the end. And then I was with her. My brother Terry and I were super close with her, and because we were the closest to where she was. But anyway, I learned a lot, man, from her. Just about family and keeping it close. Everybody sticking together. And she didn't have. My mom was funny though. She was fearful of everything. So I think it was her upbringing. She was scared to death of, don't get in that water. People can drown in a glass of water. Don't get in that ankle deep water over there. She was just so fearful. She had all these phobias. I'd say, Mom, I'm flying to Europe next week. Oh Lord, oh my God. She was like, oh my gosh. If you mentioned whatever, it killed her. Till you were back home safe. So I don't know. She taught me a lot of great lessons, but I think mainly about. She just showed me. She exposed her. That's how you love. That's how the family. That's how the family is done that way. That's how a mother does it. An unconditional love that you can't even imagine. I guess all mothers are that way, but she certainly was.
That's sweet, man. Really nice. Is there anything that you're still interested in learning how to do? I know you're into the arts and painting and obviously playing guitar and.
Yeah, there's tons I'd like to do, man. I don't really know where to start. I'm the guy that's got 100 hobbies and I'm dabbling in all of them and trying to get good at all. I've got that personality where people say, do you play golf? And I go, no way. If I played golf, I would want to kick everybody's ass so bad. I'd be out there practicing every day. I would never learn another guitar lick because I'd be trying to be so good at golf. I'm just that way. I got to be good at stuff, So, I dabble. Another thing people don't know, some people do, but I dabble in magic. I used to do close-up magic, and still mess with that a little bit. And
that's a fun hobby.
Be good at that. Yeah, I know, isn't that nuts? When I was younger, I was obsessed with it. Close-up. I had a couple friends that were just that are famous, that were just fantastic at magic, and I learned a few little things, and that was it. I was hooked. I had to learn how to do it, and I still mess with it a little bit, but I'm always learning, and that's something I probably got partly from Chet, because Chet was that way, man. He was reading, learning, getting how-to books, trying to learn how to, if he didn't know how to change an engine part in a car, he was very protective of his hands, always, but I'm that way too. If I don't know how to do it, I'm going to try to learn. I don't know how to do a lot of mechanical stuff, but if I don't know, there's all, like with artwork, I'm always I found out about a new, I guess, medium of art and a technique working with beeswax. And I never tried it before. And I go, I'm going to try it, So I just, I bought some natural beeswax and some equipment and a blowtorch and stuff and learned how to do it. And I've been doing that kind of, so whether it be art or whatever, I'm always trying to learn how to do something new, and trying something. I'm not a daredevil by any means, but I would like to. There's a lot that I'd like to learn, and you never quit learning, man. You're never too old, are you? I mean,
no.
There's always something else.
This expression, they say, school's never out for the pro, or something like that.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
You're always gotta keep learning more and more.
Yeah, it's right funny. Now I'm working on my studio. I've kind of changed my whole format over to all in the box, stuff, and I'm learning that. I knew my old studio so well, and it was daunting to think, oh my God, I'm starting kind of not totally at ground zero, but I'm really, and I'm getting there. But I.
Got rid of the tape?
No, I still got my ATR. I do still have it. I got my FN's ATR machine right there.
Now, when your son comes in there, when Ryan comes in there, does he shake his head and say, "Dad, you got it"? Yeah, a little bit. Although he's not. Ross would be the one that does that. Ross is the one that's more. But I've got two sons. Craig, you'd love it because you'd really get along with my boys big time. They're both old souls. They like Ross, my youngest. He's really the technical kid, but he likes tape. He's the opposite. He works in Ableton and Pro Tools and stuff, but he loves. When you go to his place in New York, he's got old tape machines everywhere. He loves magnetic tape. That's wild.
Yeah, he's nuts. I mean, he'll make music using all old tape machines and make them warble and do stuff. He's into some great stuff. And then Ryan, my oldest, which you know about him, he don't care about tech. He's really not in this world. It's what I was saying earlier. He's just guitars, amps, speakers,
Yeah.
He's so focused on that. That stuff I'll bring an engineer in, it's not, he's got a little setup, but it's not his world really.
But he's also at the stage in his career where he's probably got to, that's got to be his priority for now.
No, you're exactly right. He's touring all the time and he's on the road. He's in the road dog mode right now and he's touring and that's a good point. He don't have time to stop and do anything. He's just, he left last night again. He came in for one day.
Wow.
And they left back out. I can't imagine coming home for one day. I mean, he came home for one day, got clean clothes and went back out. I don't even know where they are today, but yeah, that's his world. So you're correct. Exactly.
Yeah. What's the best thing that ever happened to you? That's kind of a vague question, but what's a knee-jerk thing that comes to mind?
No, that's not I think that's a.
Now you're having that debate. You're having that debate. And you're I got to say my wife.
Exactly correct. I'm being very cautious. Well, that for sure. It's funny. Your brain does. It starts going like, well, is it musical or is it my whole life? My one best day certainly is Karen is the best thing that happened to me. I mean, I don't know what I'd do without her. And then the next couple of days are, you watch your sons being born and I don't know where you are in your personal life, but having kids, man, watching them come into this world is like, man, that's a spiritual thing, man. It doesn't get any better than that. Unfortunately, I wasn't there for my first son, but second one I was. That's a whole nother story. I barely made it, but I was out on the West Coast and flew in on a red-eye flight and basically went home and got her and went to the hospital, basically, and Ross was born. But anyway, those are the most important things, certainly in my personal life. And musically speaking, there's some great days. I think the day that I really hooked up with Chet Atkins would be
the lottery day, man.
He changed my life, really gave me so many opportunities to record and make music. Even aside from music, he just, that the day we became, I don't know what day that would be, but the day we connected, Paul Yandell, I give him so much credit. He hooked us up together and gosh, I never quit thanking Paul, and what a brilliant player too. I'm getting on a tangent for a second, but my friend Paul, I was listening to some old Louvin Brother records flying back from California the other day. Paul played on tons of those hits that the Louvin Brothers made back in the 50s and late 50s, and Ira and Charlie Louvin, and Paul played on a lot of those records. And I listened in my headphones. I had about a 4-hour flight back from Northern California, and I listened to a bunch of that. It was just, I was astounded all over again. It was so good. And anyway, I'm off of that tangent now. Okay,
no, it's all good, man.
And I'm back.
Totally. And I'm back.
Excuse me.
If you can go back in time and do one thing differently, is there something you would do differently, either in business or personal?
Well, business-wise, definitely. One thing I always think of business-wise is I think back on some goofy things I did, like when I was with Chet and Dottie West and doing some really dumbass stuff I did only because I was a teenager, and I go, why did I do that? I'm really embarrassed that I got caught doing these things or whatever, chasing a girl, having a girl on the bus or whatever it was, stupid, that I knew the rules. And you know what I mean? When you're a teenager, I won't get caught, But,
that's just normal stuff, though.
Yeah,
that's rite of passage sort of stuff.
I have all kinds of that stuff, but I don't know. One thing business-wise, we may have discussed this a little bit, but I went a long time. I started having hit records probably before I was ready to have hit records. I was ready musically I was ready, and talent wise I was ready, but I don't think emotionally I was ready, because I should have had a manager in place but a lot of people didn't do that at the time. It was kind of a pretty common practice for that time, late 70s, that some artists wouldn't do that. But I held out, and I wasn't sure on what to do, or business wise. I wasn't astute enough to make those kind of decisions, and therefore I just held out. But looking back on it, I could have really used some guidance from somebody that really knew what they were doing earlier in my career. That's a career thing, I guess, but that's one thing that I would have changed if I could, miraculously go back in time. I would probably jump in on having a manager a couple years before I did, and the roads might not have been so bumpy with my relationship with some of the labels, particularly my first label,
And man, I only have 2 questions left, and it pains me to say that because I've enjoyed this so much. I could talk to you for a couple more hours, man.
I know, me too, man. We'll continue this.
To be continued in Nashville,
absolutely,
yes.
Just catch up things, So me too. It's been great. It's really thoughtful questions, man. It's not your typical. So that's much appreciated,
Thank you. Most important lesson your business has taught you?
Man, good. I think probably I think a lot of people, especially when they're younger, they're so zealous and so ready to jump into they're so anxious, that they don't take care of business, they don't take care of themselves. I think number one, and I don't mean just business, but I mean health, business, everything. I think number one, this business has taught me to take care of yourself, and in the long run, and the most important relationships are your family and your friends and those sort of things. But I think a lot of times you get caught up and you think you're invincible. I think that's part of being young too. But later you realize, I'm not invincible. And then in my case, a lot of my peers and my friends start to go away. I remember the time in my life I seem to always defer back to Chet, but I'm sorry for that. But it's just
that's a great
such
man.
a big part of my life.
That's
but
huge.
I remember at one point Chet saying, all my friends are dying, Steve. All my friends are going away, and he was so sad. And I'm sort of getting to that point where some of mine are starting to. Especially, I was always the kid in bands, so a lot of my friends and people I played with it's starting to be that time for me, So, and I realized, you're not. Oh, really? We're not invincible. Oh no, So I think taking care of yourself, the business wise and physically too, I think is so important. And I feel blessed and lucky that I've had. We spoke earlier of our wives, but my wife Karen has been such a rock in that department to really look out for us and think about the future. But man, I think when it's all said and done, when you're younger, the music stuff don't mean as much as you think it does. It's more about enjoying it, the journey, and having fun, and really, it's because once the business stuff and the wheels start churning, and I'm probably speaking more from a country music artist that has than I am a guitar guy here, but and a publisher and all that. I'm speaking more from that angle, I guess, but. It's really not a big deal as you think it is. And when you're younger and you're cranking and you're doing these shows and all the people are coming and adoring you and coming out to see you, that stuff goes away at some point. And so I think you have to look on the other side and make sure that you're taken care of and that your world is taken care of when all that stuff's not there, because that stuff goes away with age, And I think that's where learning to play and doing it for the right reason is important too. We all start doing it for that reason. We all start playing music because we love it and it's fun. And I remember as a kid, I just couldn't wait to get home from that school bell to ring so I could run home, ride my bike home and grab my dad's old Jazz Master and sit on the bed and play. I just did it because I had to do it, and then once you get into the business aspect and the wheels turn, you start doing it for not those reasons. You do it for other reasons, and you have to do it. And then you have a contract, and so I think going back to the real reasons we do it. I'm getting off on a tangent here that I'm not sure I'm answering the question.
No, you did. You said to take care of yourself, because so all the other stuff falls by the wayside. No, you answered it very accurately.
I think that's just keep it in focus why we do what we do, and a lot of people don't take care of themselves though, Craig. I'm fortunate that I have someone with me that thinks that way, because I know you see it all the time, and it breaks my heart. You see, someone at the twilight of their career or life or whatever, and they haven't thought down the road for the future, and you go, man, that's so sad,
Yeah.
And it sneaks up on us, life just keeps churning away.
The wheels keep grinding, man, for sure.
Yeah, they do. That's for sure. So always look out for number one, you and your family,
And if you're okay me saying this, I just want to congratulate you. You mentioned your wife a few times, and y'all been together 36 years. And that is, to me, that's your greatest accomplishment, not the 4 Grammys, brother.
You got that right.
It is, man. Right.
I appreciate you saying that. I'll tell her you said that. She'll probably hear this, but she's something else. I mean, she's the strong one out of us. She's the piece that I needed, man. She's really good at what she does and keeps it all together. So I think we all have to have that strong woman with us, or that strong person that keeps us anchored, But we've been together a long time, and as I told you off the airwaves, she's seen me from every angle. I don't impress her that much.
Well, that's the greatest thing when you got a woman like that, because they, when you're having to me, right? What I appreciate about my relationship is when I'm down, which doesn't happen very often, but when I'm down, she kicks my ass and gets me up.
Yeah, that's it. And that's true. Same here. And,
and someone who's impressed with you is not going to do that.
Nah.
And
it's funny, our relationship for years, she still does. She runs, I've had a publishing business since 76, as I said earlier, and she ran that publishing. She still does, but she has people that help her now that kind of administrate our company. But she did all of it for years, and she knows the publishing world really well. And it was funny, man. I would come in with a new song that I knew was just the latest, greatest, and was going to knock everybody on their ass. And I'd come in and play it for my publisher, my wife, and I'd play it for her. Man, that's pretty good. I go, what? That's awesome. She goes, well, it's not as good as that other one you did, blah, blah, blah. But it's so pretty good. I mean, as a publisher should do. She was tough. And I'd go, damn it, I'm going back out there and I'm going to write. I'll show you, I'll write something better. She made me better writer. She made me a better writer. And we don't have that. She's not doing that so much anymore, but that was back in the day. But it was tough, man. I'd come in and she'd bust me on it, man. I couldn't.
My publisher turned me down.
Yeah, exactly. That's okay. That's not too bad. Not bad. I'm not in love with that second verse, but it's okay.
He needs work, honey.
Honey, okay, yeah.
Hey, and the last question, Steve, what has been the biggest change in your personality over the last 10 years? And how much of that change has been intentional and deliberate? And how much has just been a part of aging?
Wow. Brilliant. I've never been asked that.
You're making me go red, man.
I'll be honest with you. I don't think there's a whole lot of my personality that's changed. I really don't think that. The only thing that's changed is quite honestly, probably is the stress in my life maybe is upped. But my personality, I don't think's wavered that much. I think I'm that's a pretty even keel. Now, factors around me might make me get to the edge a little quicker or something, but and that's the stuff we try to keep at bay, I guess, in our lives. But, But I don't think so. I think maybe the business has made me, maybe if I've changed any at all, it's made me be a little more jaded, a little more skeptical. I don't trust probably. And I think the world in general has made me that way. This crazy ass world we're living in,
Sure.
Has made me a little less trusting and a little more skeptical on, on things, strangers or whatever, business, whatever. I always want to see the fine print. I want to get my magnifying glass out and make sure I get this straight,
Yeah.
But other than that might be the only way I've changed. I don't think otherwise I have. I'm still pretty easygoing. I think I'm laid back and pretty easygoing and take things in stride. Again, I probably get that from my old pop,
Yeah.
And I'm probably more like him in that respect than my mom. My mom, as I said, was always like a cat, more nervous, she was part cat probably.
Well, man,
but I don't think I've really changed that much. I really don't. I think the only way is just being a little more hard edged, a little more crusty, maybe, just because as I get older, I think you do that anyway as you get older, don't you? I get a little grumpier and a little less, a little crustier around
Sometimes.
the edges, maybe, so. But that's it. I think I'm pretty much the same guy, and love what I do. Feel like I'm so, one of the luckiest people in the world to get to do what I do for a living, and have really never done much else but pick up a 6-string guitar or bass, 4-string, and play it and make a living. Lucky to make a living doing it all these years and live a pretty fairly comfortable life. So I'm grateful, man. I can't really complain about a whole lot.
Man, I cannot thank you enough for your time.
Craig, thank you, man.
Tell people where they could find you and how they could support you. First of all, Steve Wariner. Let me spell his name if you don't know Steve already. It's Wariner. And go to his website.
Weird eye in there, right?
It's what?
That weird eye in there throws everybody off. I'm trying to figure out what I want to promote first. Oh, that's what you do.
Yeah. So listen, check out Steve's website. First of all, it's stevewariner.com. He's really got a great website, and support Steve on tour. I think he's getting ready to go hit Tennessee, Texas, and Missouri, and say hello to him when you're on tour, and tell him you heard him on this show and what a cool guy he is. His last album is called All Over the Map, right? I got that right?
All over the map. Sorry. I was getting ready to.
You're ready to say all over the place.
I don't even know what I was going to say.
Yeah, it's all over the map.
I was going to Cleveland there.
It's all good, brother.
All over the map.
It's all over the map. It's a great record. Check him out. Support Steve. And I hear, I don't know if you can talk about this. Rumor has it that you may have a custom guitar coming out.
You know what, Craig? I do have I've been working on this guitar idea for about a year, and my son Ryan is involved with me in it, and my luthier friend, who is a dear friend for 100 years, named Jeff Senn, Senn. He has helped me with. Those two guys have been helping me design this guitar, and I'm excited. I just got my hands on a prototype of this, what we've been sketching out and working on for almost a year, and I can't wait to bring it to life and let everybody see it and get their hands on it. I think it's going to be very unique and very versatile. It won't be just a guitar for one style or this style. It's going to be a good rock and roll guys are going to like it. I say rock and roll. It sounds like my dad, but the rock guys are going to love it.
Those rock and roll fellers.
Those rock and rollers are going to. But I mean, the more alternative kind of edgy players are going to like it, and also the country guys that play finger thumb style are going to like it, and I think everybody was going to be really impressed. I think it possibly might be introduced, hopefully, pretty soon. We're still dotting the I's and all that stuff, so we'll see about it. I'm pumped up about it. As you know, I'm just bursting to tell everybody about it, but it's getting close to coming to light, so I think everybody's going to really be impressed. Simply, even if they don't know who in the heck I am, they'll still like this guitar. And the ones that might know who I am are going to like it. just because it's a good guitar, and that's my focus. That's my whole point. I don't care if they know me or not. They're going to really like this guitar.
Awesome. And for all the listeners, when the guitar comes out, I'll have something up on my website as well, and probably send out an email. So get on our email list if you're not. It's going to be a real good guitar, actually. Steve was kind enough to share a couple of things with me, and
you saw it too, yeah.
Yeah. It's a badass guitar. So, man, any final words of wisdom? Again, I cannot thank you enough for your time. You're very generous and very kind, sharing all your stories. I really
pleasure,
appreciate
Craig.
it.
I will say this. I'm going to brag on your right here, man. I want to tell you, man, all my friends have said, "Oh, you got to talk to Craig. You'll love him." And I'm going like, yeah, the skeptical me. Oh, okay. But no, they all hit it on the head. Greg Martin and Steve Gibson and two or three of my pals said, you're going to be digging this interview. And they were right. And I appreciate your time and your integrity and your depth, man. You dug real deep, and I love it.
Thank you, man. I appreciate everything.
Yeah, man.
Everybody, thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this interview as much as I did. Thanks so much again to Steve Wariner for spending time with us. Please check Steve out, stevewariner.com, Wariner. Go support Steve on tour. Check out the new guitar with Gretsch when it comes out, and let him know how much you enjoy his music. Go to everyonelovesguitar.com, sign up to get notified about future episodes, get on our mailing list. And remember, most important, happiness is a choice, so choose wisely. Be nice. Go play your guitar and have fun. Till next time, peace and love, everybody. I'm out. We hope you enjoyed this show. If you did, subscribe to the Everyone Loves Guitar podcast, and you can do this online at everyonelovesguitar.com or on iTunes. And if you like the show, please leave us a 5-star positive review. The more 5-star reviews we get, the higher our show ranks, and higher rankings mean we get to continue speaking with cool, interesting guests on our show. We'll see you on the next episode, and until then, keep playing your guitar and have fun making music.